Good evening, folks. If I can call this meeting to order. This evening, just to give you a heads up what we're going to be dealing with, we have two agendas. The Committee of the Whole, and as you know, the Committee of the Whole is where we really dive into a lot of the issues, the reports that staff has brought forward, and then following the Committee of the Whole, we will be going into our regular meeting of Council, which we would expect would ratify a lot of the issues as well as the reports that were outlined within the Committee of the Whole agenda. So with that, we're going to start the meeting off with a prayer by Councillor Dave Elliott, and that will be followed by the National Anthem from Mr. Joe Longfellow. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We've been blessed with a gorgeous day, and we hope that all enjoyed it. And Father, we ask your presence here this evening as we debate the issues that are on our agenda. May it come alongside us all so that all are heard openly, fairly, and given the credence that they're due. Father, we just ask that you bless the residents of Port Colborne, keep them safe as they travel to and from work and to and from school. Father, we also ask that you bless those that are defending our country, those in our armed forces. Whoever they are, may they be in harm's way. We ask that you give them safe travels and protect them always. And Father, we just ask that in these days of the election, we ask that you put on everybody's heart what this city needs. Allow everybody to campaign freely, fairly, openly, and may all opinions be discussed. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joe. As always, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great work. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's one item that I'd like to bring to Council's attention this evening. One delegation was received, a request was received after the deadline. So Pam Crichton is in attendance to speak with regard to item 11, and leave of council would be required if council would like to provide permission for her to speak.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, I'll need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Bodner, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? Members? With none, we will now move on to items requiring a separate discussion. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Worship. Item number 9.
Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 11.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 5, please.
Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 3.
Councillor Elliott.
I'll pull items 1 and 2. 2 for the presentation, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Further items, members? I would also like to have, if a member of council would allow or raise item 4. Councillor Steele, you can raise item 4, thank you. And if staff can be prepared, Mr. Hanson, to give somewhat of an update on that. With no further items, members? You're good? Pretty well the whole agenda. I will now ask for a motion to approve the remainder of the items, please. Councillor Butters, Councillor Doucette, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We do have one presentation this evening, followed by 2 delegations, and I'll make that presentation from the podium. Now this is the highlight of my job. I get to recognize one of our employees. On your behalf, members of council, but mostly and most importantly, on behalf of the residents of Port Colborne, because as we all know, our staff, our team here, does work very diligently in the best interests of each and every resident of our community. With that, this individual who we're recognizing this evening, although he walks around with a very red neck from a goal light that's been on his neck for the better part of his life, for those of you that aren't really hockey minded, that's a goaltender who has the red light on often from letting too many pucks in the net. But with that, just an inside joke between Peter and I. But it is a pleasure, in all seriousness, ladies and gentlemen, to recognize an individual this evening, not only a member of our team, a gentleman, a friend, and with that also a person that we can all rely upon when it comes to the most important part of our business, which is the city's finances. We are here today to recognize, if you haven't figured it out yet, Mr. Peter Senez. Peter, who has now reached 25 years of service with the city of Port Colborne. And I would like to ask, first off, if Peter wants to come on up. Don't trip over the goal line. You're not going to keep giving it to you. You know that, eh? It's not that bad. Let me check that thing out anyways.
Thank you, sir.
But Peter, and I guess Bill and B, going back almost 2 decades now, I remember when we first got on council, Peter had started out with the city just before that. Peter started out on September 5th, 1989. And I know when I got on council in 94, Peter was the right arm to then Len Hunt, who was the director of finance at the time. He was hired by our city administrator and clerk, Len Hunt, to assume the position of deputy treasurer and tax collector. I guess everyone's favorite job in the city, isn't it? Isn't there a song about the tax collector or something like that?
It's very different these days.
But yeah, and I guess it was under Sheila Barnhart at the time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, Sheila was here, and of course, being the treasurer of the day. I was talking to Mr. Hunt today, and he told me that he hired Peter because of his solid accounting background and that he was well-versed and had the right attitude. And I think we can all attest to that, working with Peter for so long. Just a great attitude and a great mindset that we all agree with. But with the creation of the Director of Community and Corporate Services position and the retirement of Mr. Len Hunt, Peter took over the top job in the finance department about 15 years ago. And for the most part, we always used to say at budget time that Mr. Hunt had a knack of finding that extra 50 or, and Vic, you can relate to this, being a former administrator. You know, he always had a knack of finding that extra $50,000 or $60,000 in that bottom drawer somewhere when council was in dire need to keep that levy low and keep the tax increase low. I have to say, guys, Peter found that drawer.
Kept the tradition
Yeah,
going.
Peter found that drawer. And he's been a great a credit to the organization, especially during budget time when council struggles with trying to keep a level of service up while at the same time trying to keep the levy low. Council continues to look to Peter when new projects are envisioned and know that he is almost always able to find that cash in that bottom drawer in his office. And I have to say, and Ron, you can attest to this, being a former mayor, you know, when you have the little ones come up here, and they're touring City Hall. For a second, we stop in Peter's office, and you would think that the most mundane location to stop in would be finance for a grade 5 or a grade 4 or a grade 3. Like they want to come up here in the chamber and see the big desks and all that, and play with the microphones. But we take them down to Peter's office, and they get a bit intrigued. And what intrigues them the most is the vault. Okay, but there's no cash in there. But we bring them up here, and this is to their credit, and this is to Peter's credit as well. When we bring them up here and I put them around the horseshoe here, and we go through a mock council meeting, and we give them a scenario of what to do between two issues, a park or a sewer project. And Ron can attest to this too, because we get him down on the second floor, and we talk to him on the second floor about something that you would think would be so mundane. But they get it. They get the fact of what Peter does, how much things cost, and how important it is that we as a council rely on the folks sitting at this table. Whether it's budget time or whether it's during issues that we're debating. So with that, how apropos it is tonight that we celebrate Peter's 25 years, because in fact, what he does while he's sitting on this side of the table is give you, us, council, and the community good guidance to keep those taxes low and for us to still maintain the same levels of service that we have for many, many years. So with that, Peter, it's my privilege, actually, not only my honor, but my privilege, to be here on behalf of council, but more importantly on behalf of the residents, to present you with our small token of appreciation. Like I always say, if it was up to me, I'd give you that trip to Hawaii, buddy.
I was going to ask for that.
But they, nor you, would allow me to. But with that, a plaque that's presented to Peter Sinez in recognition of 25 years of dedicated, and being here for 14 years as your mayor, 17 years around this horseshoe, I can attest with full confidence, as well as credibility, to attest to the fact of the dedication and commitment this fellow actually offers to the city of Port Colborne, and most importantly, the citizens of Port Colborne. So Peter, with that, I give you congratulations. More importantly, I give you our appreciation. Thank you for the services that you provide us. Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And we also have a small gift here for you. And I know council's going to want you to open
We
it,
have to
so
open
you
it,
better
right?
open it.
Depends on how Nancy wrapped this up.
No, I wrapped it.
Oh, you did.
No, Nancy did.
I should have known.
For those of you who don't know, the jokes from before is because Peter was a goaltender back in the day.
Go back to
Actually,
this, right?
and a good goaltender. He was a junior B goaltender for the Niagara Falls Canucks. Ron, you can probably remember that, eh? Popping a few goals behind him. But also a goaltender for the city of Port Colborne.
Stopped a lot too, you know.
Yeah, I know you stopped a lot. But also a goaltender for the city of Port Colborne as we go out in the ice once in a while and play a lot of hockey. But we always give it to Peter about the red neck.
Very nice.
Got it. Good for you.
That's beautiful. City of Port Colborne, 25 years of service. Mantle clock. Very nice.
Mike's yours.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'll just say a few words. I just really want to thank Mr. Mayor and council. 25 years has gone by fairly quickly, actually. 10 years as a deputy and tax collector. But the last 15 years as the director and running through budgets and so on, it's been very interesting. It's been a lot of tough decisions being made by this council and previous councils, and I'm just glad that I was able to be a part of it and continue to be a part of it and help with the finances of the City of Port Colborne as we move forward into the future. So I really appreciate this and going on in the future. And if I'm still able to play goal, I'd play for the City of Port Colborne team still in the Sports Fest, but the knees don't hold up anymore. So, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. It's we have a lot of candidates for the next election in the audience this evening, and one thing I'd like to leave with you as a takeaway for this evening when you go home and you're starting to give thought to what we're talking about this evening. One of the things that you really want to do, respect, if in fact you're successful in a municipal election, is the fact that these guys over here make us look good. They're the ones that, they're part of the team that in fact give us a lot of the information and allow us to make the decisions that we make. And that's one thing I know I will never forget, Peter. And you guys have done just a yeoman's job with respect to providing us with that guidance. So all of you, as well as you, Peter, good job. Well done. With that, members of council, we're now going to move on to delegations. First off, we have a former City Administrator. From our neighboring community to the north, City of Welland, Vic Kershaw. Vic's representing and is a board member of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara Region and Foundation, and he's going to speak to us today about the 2014 Alzheimer's Coffee Break Campaign. Members of council, it's page 7 in your agenda. Vic, as always, welcome to the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a bit of a frog in my throat. You'll have to bear with me. Thank you for inviting me to, I guess it's my annual visit to this council. And it's one I look forward to every year, just as a representative of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara. Thank you. That'll be helpful. Our coffee break campaign is, as I say, the 19th in a series of campaigns, and is one that the local Niagara Alzheimer's Society has actually initiated a number of years ago. It's now copied throughout Canada, and Thursday, September the 18th, we'll witness some 10,000 coffee breaks across the country. Our campaign will be initiated that day as well, and it will run through the end of December. The campaign is one which is not exclusive to that date, obviously. It's up to individual hosts to determine when it's most convenient for them to have an actual coffee break time. Hosting one is fun, social, and easy to organize. Our society provides a free kit, while the host supplies the people and the venue. And I will be presenting you with a kit for Port Colborne later on this evening. As I said, the actual date is up to the individual host. This year, one area of support of note in Port Colborne is that the Marine Industry Charitable Council will actually jumpstart the campaign. That's an area of local interest to you, I'm sure. And they gave us a very generous annual donation. Just a note of why this campaign is so important. You all know Alzheimer's is a very difficult disease, probably the most severe form of dementia as the population ages. And Ontario, of course, our population is aging as well as the whole country, and there are some over 200,000 people living with dementia in Ontario. And here in Niagara, because we have a higher percentage of seniors than the provincial average, we have obviously a higher percentage of people who are afflicted with this disease. We've got over 8,600 people just in Niagara experiencing progressive dementia. Our society's mission, and this is why we're doing all of this, is to advocate for people with dementia and their care partners, and to provide access to a diverse range of appropriate resources and supports throughout their difficult journey that will assist them in remaining independent in their homes and communities longer. In order to do this, we have to raise $1.9 million a year, and $100,000 of that is raised through public campaigns. This particular coffee break campaign last year raised $90,000 to help us in our work with people suffering with dementia, and our goal this year is $100,000. We encourage, of course, members of council and businesses and the general public to consider hosting your own coffee break this year and make your coffee count. I know Port Colborne has been very supportive in past years, and we, the Board of Directors of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara, look forward to your continuing support again this year. And as part of that, Mayor Badaway, I would like to, if you'd come forward, I'd like to present you with a kit that your staff can utilize to start this year's coffee break campaign in Port Colborne.
Excellent.
So thank you for your past support, and look forward to your support in the future.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Members of council, any questions or comments of the presenter or the presentation? Vic correctly noted the industries in Port Colborne, in particular the marine industry in Port Colborne, just recently kicked off an event for the Alzheimer's Society, a very successful event, I might add, and raised quite a bit of money to kick off the campaign. So to all those companies, as well as I believe Algoma was at the forefront of that, good job. Lower Lakes and companies like that did a real good job in getting people all together and raising a heck of a lot of money. So Vic, thank you for that leadership, and carry on and keep up that great work. Members, no questions or comments further? Thank you. Thank you, Victor. We'll now move on to our second delegation, Mr. Scott Cook, on behalf of the homeowners of Learn Road regarding the new surface that has been applied to Learn Road. Members of council, the correspondence is listed on page 9 of your agenda. Mr. Cook, welcome.
First, I'd like to thank Council for giving us the opportunity to express our concerns about the condition of Learn Road. We concede that Learn Road might have been a tar and chip road, and that concession 2 is as well. But the tar and chip that we have on Learn Road now is not the same as what was down there before. I have 2 little examples here. This is stone from my driveway that I had tar and chip, and this is stone that I took off the road in front of my house that is tar and chip. It's a much bigger stone, and it has not set on the road. It's very soft, so soft in fact that it's easy to take a screwdriver and put right down into the road. And if you step on the edge of the road or drive on the edge of the road, it simply comes away and slides down with you into a ditch. So there's a safety factor there as well. The road was started sort of mid-July, and then there was a little hiatus where we had canal days, and so no one was working. They finished it, I think, about the middle of August. And at that time, when you drove down the road, there were just clouds of dust. That has settled somewhat, but it's still really dusty. You only have to go down the road twice with your car, and it needs a wash. Plus, the stones fly up, and you can hear them on the undercarriage of the car. And we have 2 new white cars, and I know they've been dinged with stones. The road is fairly narrow, and when cars pass, they have to move right to the outside of the road. And once again, those pieces begin to just slide off. The pictures that you have in front of you, or some of you may have in front of you, you can see that there's already weeds and grass growing up through that surface. I don't think it's going to hold up myself. And I particularly do not think it's going to hold up when the farmers begin to take in the crops and are using that road with their giant tractors and heavy weights of bringing crops in. Another thing is my wife and I ride our bikes frequently. We no longer can ride down safely on that road because there's so much loose stone that it's easy to fall. And our neighbors have motorbikes, and he told me he was waiting until the road was finished so he could take his bike out. He won't take it out. He's got a nice Harley Davidson Cruiser, and he won't go down the road because of afraid of chips, and it's slippery as well. Some other concerns, the road is fairly high now from what it was, and it comes out much wider than it was before, so it brings you right to the very edge of the ditch. And you can no longer take a riding mower and cut the boulevard, or what would be the boulevard, because the road ends and the ditch starts slanting right down. So that's a concern. I look after my place, and not to be able to cut the grass out there really bothers me, and I think it does for everybody. On Lern Road, most of the houses are set very close to the road. Mine's not, but when you talk to the neighbors, cars going by, noisy and dusty, and so they're not happy as well. I think that's basically it. There's a safety issue. I don't think it's going to hold up, and it's dirty. Okay. I was going to talk also about Holloway Bay Road, but I thought I had pictures of Holloway Road. It is just completely rutted, and I went out today and took pictures of several old toilets that are down there, and looks like somebody gutted a house, and there's wallboard and garbage from that. And that's been there for some time, but nobody has graded Holloway Bay Road in more than a year, for sure. Okay, so I feel better in letting you people know. I hope we can do something about it. And it's, again, every single person signed that paper, both the homeowners and the landowners there. And just one other complaint. I went into engineering 2 weeks ago, I think, and asked about the road because I thought it wasn't finished yet. They were going to get back to me. They didn't. I was there the other day again, and I was told that I would hear something by the weekend, and that's passed. And the only person who got back to me was Ashley, and she gave me some advice on what I needed to do to come here tonight. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. And before you go anywhere, I'm going to ask members of council any questions or comments by members of council. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. I wonder if you can give us an idea of what we've actually done to that road. I know both Councillor Butters and I were out there looking. We share the concerns that Scott and the neighbors have. It doesn't look like it's really a permanent road. It looks like there's some deficiencies there. So I'd like you to give us a thought process on, what we're up against here.
Before I go to you, Ron, I'm going to ask if members of council have any questions or comments to the presenter, so that way he can possibly take a seat. I don't think he wants to stand there for the rest of the night, so any questions? With none, Scott, thank you. Appreciate your time this evening. Mr. Hanson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to the question, surface treatment. What we did in this case, we did 2 road sections this year. We did White Road between Forks and Miller, and we did Lern Road. The first step is to pulverize the existing road. The existing road was in very poor condition. We were having problems plowing in the winter. There was numerous patches and potholes that had to be maintained. I'm told staff had this particular section, Lern Road, on the list for 5 years, trying to get the funding in place, and we actually got to it this year. The process is to pulverize the existing road. It's just a surface of asphalt emulsion and chips. This is pulverized, new stone is added to it, and the reason it's done this way is it gives the contractor the ability to actually crown the road. These roads get quite flat. It's actually crowned in, and you get some drainage off the road, and that lessens the type of potholes you get and water sitting on the road. So it's pulverized, and then there's a double seal of asphalt emulsion and 3/8 chips that are applied to it. The knock against surface treatment is that these chips are loose for a period of time. they need a period of weather, warm weather, and also traffic on them to need the stone chips into the asphalt itself. In the end, it creates a very wearable surface. Some of these surface treated roads will last 10 to 15 years with no problem. And I have some pictures, if council wants to see them, of Forks Road and a few other sections, a second concession, where we put surface treatment on in the past, and it's serviced us very well. As I said, the knock against it, there's a period of time, and depending on the amount of traffic and how hot the temperature is, there's an amount of time where there is some dust on the road, and there also are loose chips that have to get moved off the road. They'll move to the side, and in extreme cases, the road can actually be swept, and the loose chips can be taken off. We have about 280 kilometers of road in the city that we have to maintain, and many of the rural roads are still surface treated. It's a very cost-effective way to create a good wearing surface, a good pavement surface at a very reasonable cost compared to hot mix asphalt. So that's the reason it's done, and it's a way of stretching the resurfacing dollars throughout the city. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Butter.
Councillor Butter?
I'll just reserve my comments to hear some of this.
Great. Councillor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went out, I actually went out today, and Mark Cable, who's in the audience, very kindly took me for a little country tour, and it was quite enlightening. I was the one who stepped out of the Kubota and on the edge, and immediately started going into the ditch. On the south side of Lern Road, in parts of it, it is the surface. Here's the road, and then ditch. And when I stepped onto this edge off that Kubota, it was immediately whoop, and that's one of my footprints in the pictures that Mr. Cook took, because he came along shortly thereafter. There's spots along where, well, they were doing the work on the road. There was one of their machinery hit the edge, went down into the ditch. I see that as a safety, a problem with safety right off the bat. You get to that edge, you're heading into the ditch. There's no doubt about it. And it's kind of hard when you're driving to realize, just you're going along and you don't realize your ditch is like right there on that south side. You don't realize it until we actually stopped and actually got out and had a look. I was like, holy mackerel. I didn't realize it until I stepped on that edge, and then I'm like headed into the ditch. So that would be one of my main concerns. At the corner of Lern and Zavitz Road, there's a culvert that goes underneath the road, under Lern Road. The paving is done, or the road service is done right up to, and then there's like the hole, and that's even deeper than the ditch. And so that culvert, I guess, would need to be properly extended out for it to be safer, because the way it is right now, if somebody's tire hits that, it's not going to be good. It's going to be, I can see that being a serious safety issue right there. So I'm kind of trying to understand too, like how long, like Lern Road isn't a highly traveled road like some of the other ones. So what is the reasonable expectation for this to set up into that firmer surface? Because right now, it's like a stone road, and it's soft, and it's almost like jello-y. Because when we put the screwdriver into it, like I was actually really pretty surprised that was like that. So if
Get you an answer.
we need some really good answers to this, and these safety concerns looked at as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We're aware of the culvert ending. Our roads foreman is going to put an extension on that piece of culvert. That was in the plan as well. Either the contractor could have done it or our roads department. So talking to the roads foreman last week, that's going to be done. That extension will be put on. I think what you're seeing on the edge of the road in terms of safety, you're seeing a bit of overspray of the emulsion that goes on to the part that was not pulverized or built up with stone. So that'll work its way off as well with the overspray. Certainly a screwdriver into an asphalt emulsion, that's not unusual. It's not hot mix asphalt. It's not a hard surface yet. It will be once the stone and the asphalt emulsion needs together. So it's still, there's some softness to it. Again, it's a matter of traffic, and it's a matter of the weather itself and getting an amount of rain on it as well. So there's other measures we can take if it's a lower traffic area, which this is. There are very few vehicles on this road. There are other measures that can be taken, such as sweeping the road and possibly rolling it again. So those are all measures that we will monitor and look at in terms of the road itself.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor?
So at what point in time would those additional measures be put into place? Like, what are we talking in terms of a time frame? Because if this road doesn't settle right, and I'm really concerned about where that road is on the side and then the ditch right there, like that actually shocked me. Like how close it was, road, ditch. So you're saying like in time that's gonna fall off and then it's gonna fall in a ditch that needs to be cleaned, which is another issue along Lurn Road. But so what are we talking time-wise here?
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, the road was close to the ditch before. We didn't widen the road in any sense. It was close before, so there's no more safety issue in terms of the ditch being closer to the road. It was there before. The timing, it will depend on the volume of the traffic and the weather. So we'll monitor that. We'll stay on it and make sure it's done properly. I can assure everybody on council, any concerns with the public, that this technique's been used for 40 or 50 years. It's a solid technique. It creates great rural roads. There's no problem with it. This is the way it initially sets up. There's always some apprehension about it because of the loose stone. The loose stone will knead into the asphalt emulsion, and they will have a good road surface. It's just a matter of time. And I can't tell you exactly what that time will be. It'll depend on some other factors, as I said.
I think an example of this process is Minor Road. Minor Road was done about 3 or 4 years ago.
3 or 4 years.
Same method?
Yes.
So there's an example to see how it ends up down the road.
I think we have a picture, Mr. Mayor, of Forks Road, which has probably a couple thousand vehicles a day. It's got an excellent wearing surface on it, and it's stood up very well, all the traffic. It's actually a lot of truck traffic on Forks Road, and it services it very well.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kenny.
That was my question, was the time.
Okay. Councillor Butter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything Councillor Butter said, and I warned you about going with Mark on that Kubota. I mean, there's people that haven't even showed up yet since he's taken for rides. According to the legend out there, that's just word for legend, but you know. Anyways, but really, would we expect, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Hanson, could we expect monitoring to be done and something happening before winter on this road? Is that our time frame? Because it would seem that if that doesn't set up very well, how's the winter maintenance going to affect it?
Mr. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. This will all be monitored. This being middle of September, getting close to middle of September. Within a month, we'll constantly monitor this, and if any other measures, as I said, are required, we'll have the contractor back out there to take any other measures that are required to make it good. I might also add, there was a question brought up about Holloway Bay Road. Holloway Bay Road is a clay road, in case anybody in council doesn't know. It's unopened, unimproved. There's no properties on it. So we don't regularly grade the clay roads. It's only for access use by farmers, and it's used a lot by ATVs. Unfortunately, that's why these clay roads get torn up, because there's a lot of ATV use on it. So it is unimproved.
Councillor.
I'm glad you brought that up about the farmers using that, but the farmers have to get in to get their crops off those fields. So with some of the large equipment, I know Mark's got some of that large equipment, it gets difficult to get in there with the ruts. I would expect that we would be, doing our best to fill those ruts and, working with the town of Fort Erie, because they have half of that road, right? So I would expect, and I think that was the case at one time, so I would assume that the Works Department will be looking after that. I would imagine Mark has to get stuff off those fields very soon. So I just want to know, what is the expectation from the farmers trying to get their tractors down there?
Mr. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, our roads foreman was in conversation with the roads people from Fort Erie last week. There was some work being planned jointly between the two, with it being boundary road, so there was some discussion on it. But as I said, generally, they are unimproved. So I know the roads department does do some grading, and I know you've had some conversations in the past with the roads department in terms of grading in certain sections that needed some work. It's not done on a regular basis. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not improved, but as need be, there is work done on it as time permits, and the seasonal temperatures and everything has to be right to be able to use this clay and work the clay in with the equipment we have. It can't be done obviously during the fall or the spring seasons when everything's quite wet in there. So they are looking at that with the Fort Erie Roads Department at the present time.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. It's fine. Councillor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, if you're in discussions with Fort Erie, Mr. Cook also mentioned that there's somebody used it to dump off garbage from a, so maybe that you could as well make sure that's tended to as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If we've finished working with that, and I hope we have, I'd like to find a way to address Mr. Cook's concern also with the fact he was promised 2 phone calls and did not receive them. And that's service that we are supposed to be giving. And the word's out. I mean, if we don't call and we don't service, then we're in trouble. So I don't want to make a big thing out of it tonight, but I do want to make sure that that is addressed and he gets a phone call back in some way, shape, or form. Because he was promised 2 phone calls, and thank God Ashley stepped up and she did what she usually does, which is an excellent job, and she called. But the other 2 that promised him that call did not, nothing came back. So we need to do something about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, I can only speak to the fact that we have an approved policy. It's 5C. 5C says 24-hour return call, even if it's just to acknowledge, but to set some time frames, and I will further investigate tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Members of Council, any further comments or questions? I would suggest that if in fact Council does have an appetite to do something different on that road, that some direction be given to staff to look at the costing of that. That can be brought into the 2015 budget. I think ultimately that's what Mr. Cook and the folks down on Lynn Road are asking for, is that they have it brought back to the way it was, which was a paved portion of a road. But once again, I think this year this paving, or this tar and chip was done, it was completed, which by the way, especially for the Ward 1 councillors, I'm hearing that the Township of Wainfleet is going to be doing Cement Plant Road like that. So heads up. Their portion of Cement Plant Road from Highway 3 around the curve is going to be done in the same manner. I know Minor Road was done that way. This road was obviously done that way in 14. But my point is that if Council has an appetite to change that or to redo the road, then that should come forward as a request to Council and then staff. And then of course that would be added into the 2015 budget for their consideration. Councillor Butters?
Well, I think it's important. Yeah, I agree with you on that, as well as you need to know what the end result of the condition of this road is going to look like. If staff can, if it's indicated that it needs to be re-rolled, if it needs to, whatever needs to happen, then to make it as good as Forks Road or Minor Road or whatever, then we need to know whether that's possible here. And if it's not, well, then we need to look at something different. Because maybe there isn't enough traffic on there to get it packed down properly. I don't know. I'm not a roads guru, so.
Okay. Good. No further comments or questions? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Hanson. Just for clarification, what was the road and what is the road now?
Mr. Hanson.
Condition-wise and makeup of it.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott, it was surface treated. It was never hot mixed. It was only a surface treated road. The cost of interest, yeah, has been mentioned, cost $53,000 to surface treat this road. There's 5 homes on it, very low volume. To hot mix this road, same length, same width, $137,500. That's 14% of your resurfacing budget.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor Elliott.
follow up. You brought up, Mr. Mayor, you brought up Cement Road. You're probably aware of what the treatment that Wainfleet did on the south end of Golf Course Road and around the corner onto Lakeshore Road. Is this any way near the same with they did? Because I know they had trouble with the road. They had a lot of complaints from stones getting kicked up and it wasn't sealing properly. And then over time, it seemed to settle. Now you drive down Golf Course Road and around the corner and you don't even realize what you're driving on. It's just another paved road and it seems to hold up just fine.
Mr. Hanson?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly correct. That's what I was trying to allude to before, that the loose chips create an illusion of that it's not going to set up as a paved road. They always do set up as a paved road because the chips actually get pushed down into the asphalt, into the emulsion, and it creates a smooth paved surface. The same contractor that did Learn Road and White Road and Port Colborne did all the roads in Wainfleet. It's the same contractor. It's a very good process. We did some programs about 4 or 5 years ago to test this product. There were a couple different products around. One was called Fiber Mat. We used that. We weren't happy with it. Weren't satisfied. We don't use it anymore. The surface treatment, the double seal with pulverizing, is a very good system. It's been around for a long time, and it creates a very good surface. The cost analysis here is 30%. To do a rural road, it's 30% less than a hot mix road. So with 280 kilometers of road, you can do the math and see that it's not cost effective for low volume roads to do hot mix, and nobody does hot mix on every rural road that they have.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Further comments, questions, members? With none, Mr. Cook, thank you. Appreciate your time this evening. Members, we're now going to move on to reports. First off, we have the Regional Council's report. Councilor Barrett, you're up.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed their summer. Everybody's back to school and back in business. I wanted to give this council an update on some of the things that the region had done over the summer. One of them, as you may know, is that the region is responsible for, under the Ambulance Act, responsible for ensuring proper provision of land ambulance services in the region. And we did receive a report over the summer showing some areas for improvement in our EMS, emergency medical services, keeping in mind that funding for land ambulance is shared 50-50 with the province. The decline of resources due to increased call volume place stress on people who are functioning in an already demanding occupation. The increase in workload manifests itself in forced overtime, shift overruns, missed meals, and increased sick occurrences. So our continuous service quality in land ambulance care was becoming at risk. We therefore passed to move ahead with the addition of 2 24-hour ambulance crews and 2 operations supervisor effective this month. And noting as well that we will not need to require or acquire additional vehicles. We have the vehicles already, and just utilizing the vehicles that we already have. So I wanted to bring that forward for this council. Further, an economic development update was received by Regional Council over the summer. As this council may recall, I was here in March giving an update because we had overhauled and updated our economic development structure at the region. Several priorities for 2014 were identified in that March report. They were to revitalize Team Niagara, create stronger partnerships, greater investment growth, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So the update we received does acknowledge that the drive for results in jobs, investment, innovation, and entrepreneurship remain the key measures of performance for 2014. Recently, Team Niagara, including the new EDO, or Economic Development Officer from Port Colborne, developed a joint action plan. 6 priorities were identified in that action plan created by all EDOs in the region. They included economic research and analysis, business attraction, investment generation, innovation and entrepreneurship, special projects, marketing and advocacy. Work is now underway on all these priority areas with greater focus and progress on investment, growth, and innovation entrepreneurship. On the innovation and entrepreneurship side, work continues on one-year contracts containing clear measurable results with Innovate Niagara, Niagara College, and BioLink, or BROC, as agreed by Council. A multi-year contract with Vineland Research and Innovation Center was also completed. And work is underway to follow up the recent Niagara Integrated Film Festival and Innovate by Niagara on potential animation investment. Further, we're changing the way we do business so that regional departments continue to develop and implement different working relationships and improve communication between divisions. In our last meeting, we talked about economic development. I continue to push and will continue to push for economic development to weigh in on all reports that come to council, including planning, public works, corporate services, et cetera. Currently, that's not the case, but it's ideal for economic development as a key priority for the region. I know the city as well, is to view reports through that lens. So that's my councilor's report this evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to take questions as always.
Thank you, Councillor Barrick. Members of council, any questions or comments of the regional councillor? With none, David, thank you. Appreciate it. Actually, one thing I wanted to mention, members of council, we had a good meeting, Mr. Aquilino, myself, and Mr. Och and Mr. O'Howell today with the regional CAO, in particular as it relates to trying to create a more seamless, I guess, mindset and method of communication with the customer. Mostly, and I think most of which do a lot of development in communities, recognize that it gets frustrating when you have to talk to the region, and then you got to talk to the city. And what we're trying to create, quite frankly, is just one stop. So basically, when the customer is being communicated with, that they're being communicated with the local level, regardless of whether it's from the region or the city. But however, it's up to us as the region and city to actually facilitate, mitigate, as well as streamline the process so the customer is dealing with one person. And although the resources may be coming from two different entities, that's our problem, not theirs. So I have to give a lot of credit to the CAO, the new economic development officer at the region, Mr. Seguin, as well as his team, for trying to create and starting to create that environment whereby the customer deals with one person, one entity, although those entities might be delivering many resources. So it's coming along. I'm not saying we're there yet, but at the region we're getting there. So with that, once again, Dave, thanks. Appreciate it. Members of council, your turn. Councilor's items, new business. Councilor Steele, Councilor Butters, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for handing this out. I actually saw this online, and it was intriguing because I know a few people like this, but I've got to read this whole thing here. This is pretty cool. It's Mountain Road Productions and HDTV. It's called I Wrecked My House, and it says, are you or someone you know more like MacGyver than Mike Holmes? New HDTV Canada series, I Wrecked My House, hosted by comedian Steve Patterson, is looking for an unhappy homeowner with an eccentric, unconventional approach to home repairs. Who says you can't use old crutches to hold up the stairs? Your leg healed, so why not put those crutches to good use? Better yet, how about using a car jack to hold up the beam in the basement? That's pretty good. If your go-to tool for the home repair is more likely to be a roll of duct tape rather than a screwdriver, then we want you. Ever used roofing shingles to tile the foyer? Not such a bad idea, considering those shingles have a 25-year guarantee. And why return your empties for a refund? Just punch a few holes in that beer can and it makes a perfect shower head. Now that's worth more than 5 cents. Who says you can't install used linoleum on the kitchen walls for a backsplash? Why waste good flooring or use that trusty duct tape in place of caulking around the bathtub? So in essence, they're looking for people that are not handy. They use anything at their disposal to fix things around their home. So submissions should be made to casting@mountainroad.ca, and what they need in your submission is the story behind the questionable home repairs, photos of each of the eccentric repairs, a photo of you and a photo of the not so handy person you are nominating, and your contact information. Oh, that was pretty good. So good for HDTV. Maybe it'll drive more business to you, Frank.
Now, Frank, you have to have a comment, Frank.
Shingle warranty is prorated.
Members, I did get that message, and thank you, Councillor Steele, for passing that on. I did get that. Yeah, yeah. How about City Hall's roof? Yeah, well, yeah, it is today. But thanks, Councillor Steele, for passing that on. I did get that message today, and Councillor Steele was kind enough to pass it on to you folks. But they are looking for somebody in Port Colborne. For you folks that are looking, or some of you folks that are listening on COGECO, or even some of the folks up here in the gallery, they're looking for somebody or people in Port Colborne to do or to be part of the show. So for any of you, follow those instructions in terms of what your next steps will be, and we'll see you on HGTV. Duct tape. Hey, Jim, there's nothing wrong with duct tape, is there? Councillor Butters, you get the floor.
Thank you. I'm really thinking seriously about that one. There was a time. Duct tape was his friend. So I would like to know if I could get an update, maybe from Mr. Hanson, through you, Mr. Mayor. If I know Mr. Benamir's been working on like an overall drainage maintenance plan, so I just wondered how close we are to some completion of that and when it might be available for us.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's very close. He has it done, I believe. We're working on a new orientation package, just by coincidence, for the new incoming council. And one of the highlights for the drainage, if it's a highlight on the drainage side, Mr. Benamir has his 5-year program outlined on a spreadsheet. So we're going to make that available in the next few weeks through our orientation package that's being put out.
Councillor Butters, go ahead.
And will that maintenance program be available to the public at large? Because Councillor Bodner and I get questions often about what people out in Ward 4 can kind of expect in terms of when something should happen or will happen.
Mr. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't see why not. I think everything that's going to be released through the orientation package and all the projects we're listing on, I'm certain would be public knowledge at that point in the report.
If I can add to that too, Councillor Butters, I know I was talking to Henry just the other day about that, and one of the reports for both ward councillors that we're expecting within the near future is the Wignell, Michener, and Beaver Dam municipal drains. Those are in progress, and once we have those specific draft versions ready for council, they'll be reported. We're hoping that, quite frankly, that we're going to also not only bring them here, but also meet with the Lorraine Bay Water Quality Group, so that, in fact, hopefully in October, around mid-October, to present a lot of these reports to them as well, because, as you know, the Mayor's North Shore Task Force has been working diligently for the past few years with respect to the water quality, not just in the drains, but also in Lake Erie. So, and Henry's been great with that. And but again, we're hoping for those reports. I think, Ron, about mid-October, Henry said, and they'll be before both council as well as the different groups. Okay, great. Somebody else had their hand up. Councillor Kenny, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to Mr. Hanson as well. Recently, I've had complaints, several complaints, not only from hospital staff, but from volunteers that work at the hospital in regards to the new signage put up on Sugarloaf that it's by permit parking only. I certainly understand the concerns of the homeowners that live in that little stretch in front of the hospital, that there are staff and volunteers who work there parking, but now it's put a real crutch on especially the volunteers, as unless they're willing to pay for parking, there's no place for them to park. And I was wondering, with that permit parking, why we wouldn't have considered a time limit there instead. It's now has, put a question came to me, and I know that individual called Frank as well, from the Volunteer Association that works at the hospital, saying that they wondered why that couldn't have been considered and how that came about. If someone could.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks.
Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Kenny. Council will recall that we had previous complaints from the property owners along Sugarloaf Street. Council directed that we come together and form a parking permit system for those residents. That's what we've done, and that's what we put the signage up. We have since been issuing parking passes for those residents along Sugarloaf Street.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Councillor?
But what about the individuals that just go to visit somebody at the hospital? That's the ones that and of course volunteers. We do have, I know, the municipal parking there, the angle parking, but now that's taken away, what, at least 10 spots from people parking there.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, that wasn't the direction from council. We just followed the direction from council to address the neighbors that are along Sugarloaf Street, and that was it. So simply following council's direction to do so. If council wants us to look further into the actual permission, signage to allow volunteers, and we certainly can do that. We're just following the direction from council, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dan, but I'd be careful with that, because we can't have it both ways. We can't allow the residents to park there, or only the residents to park there, as was the case and as was the direction by council, and then go back and revert back to the old way, where we're also allowing other people to park there. Because you'll recall, we had complaints from the residents because other people were parking in front of their homes. Council gave staff direction to go and work out a system whereby we eliminate those that are parking in front of the homes unless they're the resident, correct? Is that correct, Mr. Aquilina?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's what we did.
Now we're getting complaints from the people that were parking there before that can't park there now. So be careful, because you may now revert back to the original problem and create some animosity and some concern by the residents that are in the area. So I'm just throwing caution to the wind here in terms of ensuring you know where we're sitting here. So, but I would, Councillor Kenny, look for some direction so that we can put this to rest.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Worship. That's the concern, though. They understand that the homeowner that owns that home is concerned because their parking spot, or their not really probably their parking spot, because they have the laneway behind their home, but they're visitors or whatever. But I guess these individuals were saying, why couldn't that, instead of being a permit parking, been just a time-limited parking, so that it ends up that resident still has the ability to have their visitors. But I don't remember ever, that's just me, maybe other people remember that coming through, that we were going to put through there's no parking there. The only people that can park there now is if you own that home. And I guess I have a few concerns about that. That's
Thank
all.
you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodner? Councillor Elliott?
I believe that came to council, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Mayor, through you just a little while ago, didn't it? That it was passed that
Mr.
we're going to permit
Through
parking?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I would say about July, the report was at council for consideration and approved.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
I guess the question would be, volunteers that want to pay for parking, why wouldn't they approach the NHS and ask them if they could have a pass while they come and volunteer? Well, they're parking, there was an issue with residents being able to park in front of their houses, taken up by everybody else. Nobody wants to pay at the NHS. And now it's getting dumped on us that we don't have parking available for people to go to the hospital to work. I'd rather provide parking for our residents than have to provide parking for the people in the hospital, when the hospital should provide the parking for their employees, whether they be full-time paid employees or volunteers. I would ask the NHS, why don't you let them park for free if they're volunteers and don't receive a stipend for volunteering their time? There would be your permit to allow them to park in the parking lot for nothing.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Further comments or questions on this issue? Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two items. The first one through you to Mr. Hansen. Ron, it's just come to my attention that although the Cloud Street West looks wonderful the way it's been redone, but there's a few cleanup items that are yet to be done. Apparently the pavement has not been done to meet up with the concrete at the northeast corner and the southwest corner of Kalali and King, and the entrance to the Masonic Lodge. So if you could maybe follow up on that and see that those bits of paving get done to make things nice and smooth and safe, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Mr. Hansen comment on that. Mr. Hansen.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yes, there's a deficiency list for the project. It's a regional project. The hand-placed asphalt, they've been working their way starting at the Oakwood Steel Street intersection, working their way easterly. They've got all the intersection done at Steel. The work around Lionsfield is complete, and they still have to get some of the work done, I understand, in the deficiency list at the intersection of King and Kalali. So that'll be done probably sometime this week.
As well as there's one more deficiency is over on Silver Street, Silver and Kalali. I believe there was a deficiency along the sidewalk there, or in the, I believe it was the northeast corner where it was ponding a bit. So they'll be looking after that as well.
Yes, it'll be on the list.
Councillor?
That's great, thank you, and I'll pass that along to the resident that brought that forward. And the other item I have is just to let everyone know that the Volunteer Appreciation Barbecue was held yesterday, and it was a great success. It was well attended. I want to thank Harry and his staff for doing a great job putting it together. It was just very well done, and thank Councillor Butter for channeling her inner artist and doing some pretty creative face painting. We had wood nymphs and everything running around, but it was just very well done. Our oldest volunteer there, who attended and had a great time, has 35 years of service to Port Colborne, which is wonderful. And our youngest one has no years yet. He's only 3, and we've got him slated in. So it was a really great day, though. The kids had a great time. Everyone else had a good time, and I just, again, thank you, Harry, your staff, and Nancy Giles, of course, always goes out to the nth degree. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Ange, and thank you too, Ange and Barbara, for coming out and spending your time doing some face painting, and of course, Angie just running around and selling tickets and doing this. But pardon me? No, no. I look funny. I look funny enough. But I have to give credit a lot of credit to staff as well, Harry and his team, because it's really becoming more and more of a family event where everyone's involved. And quite frankly, what I liked about yesterday as well, because I went around talking to some folks, and how they bring out their relatives and their kids and their families, and how it also inspires them to now volunteer. I was talking to one family that had, I think, 3 or 4 young teenagers, and they were actually asking Mom, Dad, and myself, how can we volunteer next year? You know, because they've seen both what their parents are doing, but as well how they're being appreciated. And I think that's so important for the city, just to say those 2 words, that thank you, which sometimes we don't say enough. But and I loved the sack race, especially the little ones. They could barely. It was priceless, but it was a lot of fun. But thank you to you guys, and Harry, to your team. Thank you as well, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'm not sure who to direct this to, so I'm going to mention it, and then we'll go from there. Skateboard park. It's been a great success, and we know it has been a great success. But yesterday, I was approached by some parents, and I was approached by some of the little ones, young ones, teenagers, 13, 12, 14. One of them being my grandson, by the way, who is 12. They've indicated to me that there appears to be a young man there, a 22-year-old. That's the age they seem to give them, and it seems to be consistent through everything, who shows up in the morning, especially when there are other kids on Saturday and Sunday, with a backpack full of beer and some other partying stuff, and goes on to skateboard, swear at the kids, tell the kids where to go, and at the same time is drinking this beer and is doing whatever else he wants to do. And the kids are starting to get, they're starting to fear this man. And it appears to be a young man. I don't know who it is, and I don't know if it's a young man or if it's an older teenager. It appears he's in his 20s, but that's what the parents seem to be giving me. But I think we need to let the police know. We've not had this report before, and it's just starting to come up now. And I want to nip it in the bud before anything happens.
Thank you, Councillor. What I would suggest to any member of council and to those watching on COGECO, that when you do find these situations happening anywhere in the city, not just a skateboard park, just simply call the police, make a complaint. That way we can get the NRP there right away. However, I'll be sure to make a call tomorrow to the Staff Sergeant Scotland, and ensure that he's aware of it. Yvonne, if you can pass me on the particulars, time of day, which days, if you receive some of that, if you can just throw me an email on that, and then I can just kick it over to Scotland, and we can take it from there. But by all means, you know, to those folks that are watching, don't wait to talk to a counselor. Don't wait to have something even worse happen or have it escalate. Just simply call the police and make the complaint. They would react accordingly. So, but with that, But with that, I'll definitely follow up. And with staff, if we got some footage of that, that would be great. If we can get some pictures, Mr. Howe.
Your worship, it's all under camera. And we record it for a period of time. We produce a copy of it. We have in the past and given to the NRP. If we have some idea of the time, because nobody's got time to sit and watch it for days. If we have some idea of the time, your worship, we can pull that off of our disk and supply it to the NRP. That can identify it, and as soon as we find out who it is, if they get charged, that's fine, but we will also issue orders of no trespass.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. And thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I guess, to engineering and Mr. Hanson. I got two complaints about the same issue. One of the complaints was escalated pretty highly with paving, especially on West Street. The timing of the paving of West occurred on the north end of it at West and Clarence Street going south, right at lunchtime, when the restaurants had patrons on their patio. Guy drove a street sweeper and blew dust all over the place right in 11:30, quarter to 12, and completely disrupted everything. There was several stores that had all their wares on display on the sidewalks, as they do, and this guy comes along and starts blowing everything all over the place. I guess my question is, on that issue, do we control scheduling of when the contractor will be paving? We can't fix what's already happened, but going forward, can we schedule where they are, at what time they are, and have them get in and out of areas that will have a negative impact on the commercial side of things, even in the residential area? The second complaint on the same issue was on Elgin Street in front of Port Colborne High School. Kids are out of school for 2 months. The pavers show up the week they go back to school. Why can't we have that section of road paved prior to the kids coming back? Again, it's hindsight, but going forward, if we're going to pave in the areas where we have an opportunity to get in before traffic happens, can we schedule it before this traffic happens?
Mr. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Scheduling construction in Port Colborne is very difficult. We have to work around all the special events. If we try to schedule an August canal days on, we can't pave. You have to get time frames for these contractors. We tried our very best to get West Street and these downtown streets paved at the appropriate time. We didn't want to interfere with the car show. So we made arrangements with the contractor to actually do the work on a Friday, the milling, and have them come back on a Monday and a Tuesday to get it done before the next car show on Thursday. Now, if we tell the contractors they can't pave during lunch hours or during supper hours, we'll never get any work done. It's getting more difficult all the time to schedule the contractors around the special events. Any other municipalities see, they tear the roads up and they do the work all through the summer. We don't do that. We work around it. And all the time we tried to do the work on West Street, there were complaints from the bars and the restaurants that the contractor was working on West Street. I don't know any other way to pave it unless we start paving at midnight or 2 in the morning under lights. There's really no other way to do it. We give them time frames. The time frame to get West Street done in August, our next choice was late November because the contractor was going to finish the 406. And that's the time frame he gave us. And he was very cooperative in getting the Port Colborne streets done in the late August, September period after canal days. Because we can't do it before canal days or during canal days. That's the problem we have.
Thank you,
when
Mr. Hanson.
flavors are on, we had the same problem in the parks.
Thank you. Councillor.
I think November would be pretty good with the people on West Street, if you want to use that as a scheduling time. 7 o'clock in the morning, if you want to start paving and pave down West Street from Clarence heading south, 7 o'clock in the morning, there's not a whole lot of people out, because I did see them the very next day, starting at 6:30, 7 o'clock, down on the Sugarloaf end, coming back. So they do have the wherewithal to start very early in the morning. They could have had that whole stretch paved before stores were even open. I know it's an issue. I know that they start paving in May and in April. Maybe could have had stuff done then too. So it was an issue. I saw pictures. The complaint was there. If we can do something about it next time, if there is a next time in those areas where there's commercial business. The complaint was that the gentleman that ran the street cleaner saw that everything was open and businesses were serving customers at lunch, and just fired the thing up and blew the dust over, regardless of who was there. So I'll just move on to the second item, and this is what we're talking about, the Niagara Regional Police. I've had several complaints on the residents on Clarence Street on the north side about dirt biking back in the clay pits. And I live on the opposite side of the road, and it's unbelievable. It's not once in a while, it's every single day. They ride all days on Saturdays and Sundays, and after school on weekdays. And it is just getting to the point where one of the people that complained is just about gonna lose their marbles over it, because it's incessant, it's all the time. And I was just gonna ask the mayor, I don't know when Police Services Board sits, or if you can have in contact with Staff Sergeant, if we can look into that, because it really is becoming an issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate you bringing that to my attention, and I'll definitely be looking at that tomorrow. Members of Council, any further new business or updates? Councillor Bodnar.
Mr. Mayor, it's so new it happened tonight, but just to pick up on the Lurn Road Zavitz, Ron, I had called you about maybe putting markers on the corner of Zavitz and Lurn where we did that new work. And Councillor Butters was there today to see where that culvert is. It drops right down into 18 inches to 2 feet. I know there's talk of putting an extension on there, but in the meantime, can we get some markers up there, temporary or something, to alert people to that area?
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we'll get those up tomorrow, but it'll be a temporary measure till the culvert's extended.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Any further new business? Councillors' items. Just one thing, Mr. Hakeem. I happened to enjoy last night's Niagara Whalers game, our newest junior team here in the city of Port Colborne, which, by the way, members of council, I would encourage you to go out and see it. It's good hockey, and I'll tell you, last night we had a good crowd, a great crowd. And and Harry, thank you for showing up. That was kind of you. Anyways, a few deficiencies in the arena that we've talked about in the past that we want to look after. We talked about the stands on the west side of the arena in the past, about the sight lines from the top that I know you're on, and that's going to be coming back probably to the next council, which I hope they deal with it, as well as the dressing rooms. But I also, actually, Councillor Steele brought to our attention last night was the speakers. You can't hear nothing on the one side of the arena, so you might want to look at that as well. And I'm just reading an email from the Director of Hockey Operations for the Niagara Whalers, who just sent me an email on the same issue. So he actually told us, Chief, to put the fire truck on hold and put speakers in the arena. I can forward you the email. But yeah, if we can look at that, Harry, as well. And that one's fresh too. Councillor Bodnar, fresh, right on the email here, 2 minutes ago. So if we can look at that, that would be great. Members of council, no further new business?
Oh, you didn't win the half and half, by the way.
I didn't win the half and half? No. How much was it?
About $180.
That's good. Yeah, good crowd. Members of staff, are there any updates? Nothing? Budget, when's budget starting, Peter?
But budgets are already out to the departments, and so hopefully we'll be working on them in the next 2 months and be brought back to the council probably December.
Excellent, excellent. Well, good luck with that. Members, we're now going to move on to item 1. Councillor Elliott. I'm sorry. Let's do the minutes first. Sorry, Councillor Elliott. You can move it. You can move it. The minutes of the 20th meeting regular committee of the whole, dated August 25th, 2014. Moved by Councillor Elliott. Second by Councillor Danch. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. Now, Mr. Elliott, you can start us off with item 1.
Thank you, Mayor. That 25-year certificate's looking pretty good for retirement right about now. I'd like to change that in midstream. You going for the picture? Item 1. The Council of City of Port Colborne authorized entering into an agreement with Dependable Emergency Vehicles of Brampton, Ontario for manufacturing delivery of pumper tanker in the amount of $292,800 plus HST, and further that the city clerk and mayor be authorized to execute the appropriate agreement, and further that the existing tanker be auctioned off and sold as has been past practice, and further that the Director of Community and Corporate Services be authorized to arrange the necessary debenture funding in the amount of $301,000 to the Infrastructure Ontario Loan Program administered by the Region of Niagara, and that the Treasurer, City Clerk, and Mayor be authorized to sign all appropriate documents and agreements.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Doucette, questions or comments to that? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the Chief. Our term is up, and in the 4 years we've been here, how many new vehicles have we purchased for the fire department in our term of council?
I believe it's going to be the third one.
Councillor?
Thank you. So what is the average age, or what are the ages of the vehicles that we will have after this purchase, if it goes through? What's the oldest vehicle we have? And obviously this will be the newest one.
Chief Cartwright.
Your Worship, all of the vehicles would be relatively new. The oldest would be a 2000 pumper that was bought in 2000, received delivery of in 2000, 2001. That was bought by the previous chief. So that would be our oldest vehicle. The next one, that would be 6 years roughly, would be looking at to replace it.
So just for clarification, if I may, Chief, the 3 vehicles that we bought in the last term are what? What kind of vehicles are they?
We bought, in the last 3 vehicles we bought was the first one, engine 1, which is a truck that was bought from Pierce. The second truck would have been the rescue truck, which was bought 2 years ago. That was bought, and that was a replacement for our oldest engine, which was 25 years old. And then this truck will be purchased with the hope of council's approval tonight.
And just for those that are watching on COGECO, what kind of truck?
It's going to be on a Freightliner, and it's a pumper tanker.
Pumper tanker. Okay. Councillor?
I guess everybody looks at buying new vehicles for the fire department as, safety of the public and safety of the firefighters themselves. I take a look at a 20-year-old truck for us. How many miles are on it? What's our cost to run it? What's your annual upkeep? I'm going to say probably next to nothing. In 20 years of service, does it have 50,000 kilometers on it? Quick yes, no. Does it have that many?
Chief.
Your Worship, I didn't check the speedometer, didn't know the question was coming tonight. That truck is almost 25 years old. And the issue with the tank truck in particular is that once it hits 25 years, it's no longer recognized by the insurance industry. That's one of the reasons we need to replace that truck. We'll be taking delivery of that sometime between the first quarter and the first half of next year, and the vehicle will be in its 25th year.
Okay.
The cab and chassis will be in its 25th year.
Councillor?
So basically, the only way we can sell it is to sell it as cab and chassis. You can't really sell it as a fire truck because of the age of it?
It depends on who buys it. Your Worship, sorry. It depends who buys it. There are some areas in Canada, in particular the East Coast, where trucks can be used. But normally in Ontario, very difficult to sell it as a fire truck. That's why we sell it through auction.
Okay, thanks. And the last question would be to the treasurer. The $300,000 debenture will take possession of the truck next year. When is that applicable to budget, and how will that be financed, and what's the length of the debenture?
Mr. Sinez.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this debenture will not be issued until around such time that it will be delivered. So we're looking at, I believe, spring of next year, and which means then it'll part of the debenture, or likely half, would be on the 2015 budget, and the other half brought in on the 2016 budget, depending on timing of when that debenture is issued. This debenture is, I believe, for 20 years, so for basically the life of the vehicle, and I believe it was about trying to think, about 25,000-30,000 a year over the 20 years.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the treasurer again. What's the interest rate on the debenture?
On the 20-year debenture, it's running around 3%, I believe, right now. 3% for the entire 20 years.
Good. Members, questions or comments? Further? With that, your pleasure to the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. In favor? Come on, guys, get your hands up. In favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Members, we'll now move on to item 2. Councillor Elliott.
I'm sorry, Mayor, my iPad just went to sleep. Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report number 2014-31, subject update report on the water distribution system infrastructure needs study. Presentation is from Rick Gable from Associated Engineering. We'll be providing a presentation with regard to the above report. That the Council of the City of Port Colborne received the Engineering and Operations Report 2014-31, updates report on the water distribution system infrastructure needs study for information.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Butters. Gentlemen, I know you guys are really right into the meeting, the first part of the meeting. I can see how eager you guys look when you're listening to us. Watch your head there. But the floor is yours. And Council, if we can pay special attention to this, because this is going to be part of our asset management planning, as well as some of the audit services that we're actually reviewing at the moment. So if you want to press the gray button there, you're live.
There we go.
Yours. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Hi, my name is Rick Gable. I'll be presenting this overview of the report along with Mr. Mike Fortin, who's going to assist me with the financial plan. How do I... Oh, okay, good. So we'll just look at a little background, purpose of the plan, and how the system works. And Mike will review the financial plan, and then we'll look at a few other things that we did, other parts of the report that we were asked to do, and talk about a few of the primary recommendations. So the City of Port Colborne's distribution system services about 16,000 of the 19,000 or so residents. This report is an update to the last report that was done in 1996. So this is a needs study, which is a dynamic plan used to make decisions in order to provide a uniform level of service, and so that this process can pay for itself. This is the current system, color-coded by material types, and you'll see that about half of it is cast iron, which is red. The blue pipes are plastic pipes, PVC and HDP polyethylene. And the rest of minor bits are steel, ductile iron, and asbestos cement. There's 120 kilometers of water mains in the city. So the first thing we did was a hydraulic analysis, which involves a computer model. And we looked at the system during average day demand. We looked at the system during max day, which is a requirement for finding, assessing fire flows that are available in the system. And also during the peak hour demand, which is typically coffee time in the morning. And from that, we found that the residual pressures within the city are acceptable everywhere, within the acceptable range of 40 to 90 psi. There were, however, about 24 fire flow deficiencies throughout the system, and these are yet to be confirmed with actual fire flow tests, which are currently underway. In fact, I'm going to Public Works tomorrow morning. %90 of the breaks, then we looked at, after the hydraulic analysis, we looked at reliability, and that's mostly with brake history. We found that 90% of the brakes were on cast iron pipes, and 75% of those were on the smaller cast iron pipes, 6 inches and smaller. Port Colborne's cast iron pipes are lasting around 50 years or so, and are at the end of their lifespan. HDP and PVC pipes, plastic pipes, of course, last longer, but it'll take time to do those replacements. As you saw, there's half of the city is still cast iron. So what we're looking at as part of developing the capital plan is what do we replace it with? So just about every kind of material in there gets replaced with either plastic, which is PVC, is primarily PVC, or the larger mains, it's just 600 mils or larger, will get replaced with concrete. That's due to costs and strength requirements. So then we came out with the proposed projects for the capital plan. Now, almost all the replacement projects are on cast iron pipes. The reliability risk projects target just about all cast iron. And these areas are highlighted in red. These are the areas that are critical for need in the system, and they have the higher frequency of breaks. The hydraulic projects in blue are projects that are required to remedy the fire flow deficiencies. These are the absolute minimum projects that the system needs. These are the high priority items. Ideally, you would do these in the next 3 years, but there are restraints on budgets and all the rest. So in the financial plan, you'll see that these projects are spread out over the next 10 years or so. Cement road down in the southwest corner is not included, as that was already underway with separate funding. Oops. This is the same projects from the map, only listed in order. This capital plan is developed to average around $630,000 per year for replacement. These total projects represent only 5.5 kilometers, or 4.5% of the city system. This list is, of course, obviously dynamic as well. It will vary from year to year as work is completed, different funding becomes available, and priorities change. Again, these are the minimum projects that need to be done. The next slide is the financial part.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick. The financial plan, what I've done is I've taken the capital plan for the pipes that's been developed by the associated crew, added to that the additional capital items, meter replacements and so on that have to be followed, and the O&M costs, and gone through the kind of rate setting exercise that your finance department does every year for the budget. But I've done that for a 10-year period, going forward 10 years, rolling over debt service costs and all those other things, including inflation and so on, come up with this analysis. 8%. So there's your capital plan, ballpark about $1 million a year to execute these projects over a 10-year period. The profile may change. We think there may be, this one may be an error, but that we'll catch that in the final report. But ballpark, you're looking at $1 million a year. And my tendency is to, if you need a big rate increase, do that in the first year, and then after that, stick to a fairly low increase. You'll get complaints for 1 year, but you won't get complaints for year after year because you're trying to push through 4 or 5% every year. So this capital plan, with all your regular O&M costs, with your other capital items, looks like you can finance it with a rate increase of 8% in 2015. For the typical residential customer, that's $35 per year, okay? Over the 10-year period, we're looking at 8% this coming year, 2% a year thereafter. 2% a year is what we're expecting with inflation, is the target that the Bank of Canada has for setting inflation. So 8% this year plus 2% thereafter should finance this capital plan and carry all your other costs as well, unless there's something untoward that shows up. Now, where do we? So with that adjustment, you're generating a surplus in most years, allowing contributions to capital reserves. Let's see if this works.
Yes, pull back on that.
Okay.
Is that it? Uh-oh. Right click, hit next slide.
Huh?
No. Oh, it's.
Let me put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing.
Oh, there we go. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Rick. Now, what I've done is I've tried to balance funding from reserves and funding from debt. So in this particular sort of base case analysis, I've assumed a fairly naive approach, but I've assumed anything over 500,000, any project over 500,000 will be covered by debt. Anything under, we'll try to cover with reserves. Over the period, debt increases to 3.7 million. Reserves are covering 57% of all the capital project costs. Okay, you can change that, but changing it means if you want lower debt, it means increasing your initial rate increase. So you've got more cash coming in, so you've got larger reserves. Let's see if I can do this again. Wow.
No, that's your last slide.
That's the last slide?
Yeah, that's the last one you gave me.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but that's I wanted to keep it fairly short and sweet for the presentation.
Thank you. And before we go on, I'm going to ask members of council, any questions or comments to this point?
I'm still in shock, okay?
I still have more.
You know, I'm shocked that you guys are in shock. This isn't new news. This has been something that's been facing this council for the past decade and a half. And quite frankly, I have to give staff a lot of credit. We've been dealing with it. But now you're seeing what's left. So it shouldn't come as a shock. It's reality. We've been dealing with it for the last 2 decades. So it's just a matter of how we're going to finish the job that we started. No questions or comments? Of the presenter, yeah. No? Go ahead.
Okay, some additional assessments or things we looked at are the level of service being provided. So in the conjunction with city engineering staff and other staff, we developed a set of strategic goals for the management of the water system. These are broad-based expectations for reliability, water quality, sustainability, and regulatory compliance. And it's important to note that from the customer survey that we did, 92% of the customers said that the system operation is fair or better. 75% said good to very good. So that's positive, right? During our review of the operations, we did an analysis of work orders. Now, this is a summary of the analysis of those work orders, and we found that these numbers do not really accurately reflect the staff's performance, either actual or the public's perception. So we dug a little deeper, and we did identify the need to revise the forms used to track the work orders and the progress of addressing complaints and all the rest. And we found that it's more of a procedural thing. It's not that it's not getting done. It's just we couldn't get the information to show it. This is currently being addressed by the Public Works Department as well. We also reviewed the metering program and the DMAs in the metering districts. And oops, one thing that we did find was that, and it matched up to our hydraulic analysis, is that there are currently dead ends on the system because of the valves that are closed for the district metering. And it does have an effect on, some effect on fire flow, and it has effects on the low disinfectant residuals. Now, the extent of that isn't fully known until we do a little bit of further investigation, and we're working with the engineering department to see what those effects are. And there are recommendations regarding that. So just to briefly go through some of the priority conclusions and such. Port Colborne is experiencing higher than level of water loss. Given the amount of water loss during a year at $0.093 cubic meter, the current losses represent the equivalent of almost $1 million a year based on 2014 dollars. So that's part of the conclusions in the report, and recommendations, are to continue to making improvements to the accuracy of the DMA metering program and the billing system to be able to identify where the losses are occurring, whether they're leaks or illegal connections and et cetera. This one's got, there we go. So some of the recommendations are to perform a hydraulic analysis to identify the effects that are happening with the closed valves. This may result in installing meters on extra pipes, which we have included initially in the capital plan, and confirm the correct assignment of water customer billing accounts to the DMAs. There's some minor discrepancies on which accounts go to which DMA. There are some errors, and those are currently being looked at and being addressed. Water use bylaws need to be appropriate and enforceable in order to help reduce water loss. So there's recommendations regarding the inspections of private property connections, metering of private property connections, and allowing for penalties and fines so that you can actually enforce that. Did I go too far? There are, well, the report's large, and there's many more recommendations. Not least, one is developing a distribution operating maintenance strategy. It's more of a detailed strategy to help complement the existing QMS procedure and guidelines that are being used right now. Collection of the data to allow for proper assessment of whether levels of service goals are being met, and revisions to the failure reports to enable that. And there's way more that we have time to go through now. So the next steps are circulation of the draft report, posting the draft plan for public comments, and then once everything's commented on and feedback is provided, the municipality would adopt the plan and we'd go from there. This report should be looked at and reviewed, like the needs and the capital plan should be looked at every 5 years and updated. Thank you.
Great, great work.
Yep.
Members of council, questions or comments to the presenter or to staff? Councillor Doucette.
Just a comment. I agree with you that we've been dealing with this for quite a few years and everything else. The only thing is I thought we had made more progress in this, and that's why I believe most of us are shocked at the issue. It's not that we didn't know this was like that. It's just that I thought, and I felt, and I believe most councillors here felt, that we had progressed a lot more than this. And it looks like we haven't. So we've got a lot of work to do, and hopefully we can deal with it as quickly as possible, at the same time having as little impact as possible on the citizens. And I don't think there's any way we cannot have an impact, but as little an impact as possible. And I believe that's where Councillor B. Kenny was, when she was stating she was shocked, because we have done a lot of work here in the city. We have done a lot of work, and yet this more or less indicates we've got a heck of a lot more than that to do. So,
thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hanson, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have done a lot of work. I mean, you can see from the report that 50% of the cast iron pipes have been replaced with plastic PVC. That's a huge step. A lot of the pipe that was done in previous years was in very poor condition, a lot of leakage. So it's improved drastically. What we have to reinforce is that we know that the capital program has been underfunded over the years. We've done our best with what resources are available and trying to keep the rates at a reasonable rate for the ratepayers as well. So I would agree 100% with Councillor Doucette that there's still a lot of work to do. We have to pin down the source of the water losses, and it's not easy. We've looked at this over the years. There's not a lot of water loss in terms of leakage itself, so there's other sources there that we have to work on and pin down. So this is something we have to continually work on all the time.
Just before you sit down, Mr. Hanson, what are some of those other sources?
Billing, theft. We're aware of some instances where the metering through, careful how I say this. There could be places where there's industrial applications where there's unmetered fire lines, for instance, as an example, that should be metered. So we're working on a strategy for that. Backflow prevention is a strategy that we're working on presently. So there are other sources, and we're going to work hard at that and ensure that the billing process coincides exactly with what's out there now, with what's being metered, so that there's no artificial losses in terms of the paperwork itself. So that's another thing we're looking at.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. You know, we know what is coming up and what we have to do. Where are we at in making sure that we're ready with projects to take advantage of any government plans that come up that we could share the cost of doing it? Are we staying on top of that? And, you know, in knowing what we're up against now.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great question, because this INS studies like this, both in the water side and in the CSO side and in the storm sewer side, are the platforms for establishing capital programs for funding. Without a program like this in place through all the infrastructure, and without the financial plan that's in place through Treasury, you can't make application. They just won't accept the application. So these are the building blocks. These master plan studies are the building blocks for those funding. And you'll notice later on in the agenda tonight, we've actually come forward with one of the programs based on one of the studies done through Associated Engineering.
Thank you. Councillor, that's fine. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to, I guess, Ron and general comments. I mean, Councillor Steele's always jumping at the bit at this one. Let's just go out and borrow the money because it's cheap and do as much as we can. And it's one of those things where how much do you want to do and how much are people willing to pay? And by this report, obviously there's a lot to pay for. How much do you bite off all at once? You try to keep the rate increases manageable, and yet we take a look at what our system shows now. We've done a heck of a lot of work. I guess the one thing that jumps off the page, not only on the capital side, but is on the water loss side. When we see that $1 million, it kind of is emblazoned, and it's, you know, you've commented on it. Can you just quickly go over what the loss rate is right now, how much we've gained in the last 5 or 6 years? We've dropped the percentage that we have lost, and just quick summary on what we're doing to prevent more of that loss from happening.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In any water distribution system, because of age and size of the distribution system, there's always going to be water loss. there's always going to be 10 to 20% water loss in most systems that you see. You see the percentages on them. Water loss studies like this really help to pin down where the sources are, and there's a lot of different ways you can lose water in the system. It's not just old pipe, it's not just breakage. Geological conditions dictate that if you have fractured rock and the water mains are down in fractured rock, sometimes you have breakages and minor losses that go away within the water table. They never come to the surface. You don't see them. I've seen percentages here in Port Colborne over the years as high as 40% loss from what's being purchased from the region. I'm not sure if either Jim or Rick could comment in terms of what the current non-billable percentages are. I haven't seen it lately. I think the last one I saw was in the 28% range. Jim, does that sound about right? 28. Yeah, I've seen it as high as 40, and the last one I think I saw part of the study was 28%, which is too high. You always want to work to something below 20%. I think obviously as something that's workable on an older system.
Councillor?
I mean, you take a look at the $1 million that we're losing, and if you seal the system up and didn't lose anything in a perfect world, you could take that $1 million in collectibles and put it into improving the system. But you're never going to get 100% sealed system. So it's one of those things where you take a look, like I think we all kind of sat back and went, wow, thanks for dragging that dark cloud into the council chambers. But and no offense, it's just when you take a look at the numbers and it's a system that's older that we're dealing with, how do you allocate the finances and how much do you do? And I mean, like the mayor said, this council, past councils have been aggressive in doing that. And it looks like even through that aggression, we're still behind. And you take a look at some of the other municipalities around that are newer that have all brand new piping in the ground and they have no water loss. Their water rates are cheap because it's a brand new tight system. So we're 50% there, a little bit better than 50%, still a long way to go. And it's a heck of a cost. So if we want to replace it all, it's going to cost the 8% increase in the first year. Might be tough for a lot of people to swallow, but if it's going to raise the capital to do some extra work, you're right, do it in the first year and listen to all the complaints in the first year and then kind of let it ease off after that. So it's something that we're going to have to look at come budget time.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Mr. Hanson?
Just make one other comment, I think, on the percentages. Be a little wary of the percentages. There was a time when we had an industry that was a very high water consumer. We don't really have a large water consumer at the present time. When we had one of the industries that was consuming a large amount of water, of course, the more they purchased from us, the lower the percentage of the losses. So once they went off the system and had their own source of water from the canal and treated it for their process, our percentage went up from 25% to 40% immediately, which is a bit false. The losses weren't any higher. We just had less sales.
Another thing I wanted to mention too, to put some perspective to this whole discussion with respect to the question that you asked, should we tackle it all at once? One of the things that we've really promoted in the last year is putting together an asset management plan. And with that asset management plan and through the Public Service Accountability Board, PSAB, we have to ensure that not only do we look at water, wastewater, storm sewers, but you also have roads, you have sidewalks, you have parks, and the list goes on. So through that process, or throughout that process, the expectation is to answer those very questions with respect to where the money goes. My advice to you is the money goes where you can get the best return. And as Councillor Elliott recognized correctly, is that if you can save that $1 million by putting more money towards water, wastewater, and storm, then of course a lot of those dollars can then be recouped and put back to all those assets within your asset management plan. That's a discussion for another day, but it just goes to the question that was asked with respect to how far do we go with this and how fast do we actually fund it. Councillor Elliott is correct. At the end of the day, we've done a heck of a lot of work in the last 2 decades with respect to water, wastewater. We've accelerated it quite aggressively in comparison to other municipalities. We can now see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we still got some work to do, and there's some costs attached to it. But that cost has to be not only considered on its own, it also has to be considered, my point is, within the whole asset management plan, because there's a heck of a lot of other assets that you're going to have that need the same funding arrangements. So be very careful on which ones you pick and choose at the end of the day, and ensure that those ones that you do choose give you a better ROI, return on those investments, so that therefore you can reinvest those dollars into other assets within your asset management plan. So, members of council, further, Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. I understand that the 10-year plan and certain projects identified, but back to the water loss part of this, is that also part of the plan in that reduction of water loss? Is it part of it to say that the target to reduce that by percentages or however that would work, is that part of this plan? Or is it kind of the result of putting that plan into action that it will go down?
Sure, yes. So, there's not, the capital plan is not built on aiming to reduce water loss specifically. I mean, we don't know where all the leaks are. That's, that's one of the main reasons for the DMA monitoring program, and that tells you where to look. There's also where to look for leaks, and then there's many recommendations on how to quantify the water that is lost. So water loss is composed of apparent and real losses. The real losses are primarily the stuff that goes into the ground you never see again because it's rock and gravel and the lakes over there, right? The apparent losses are not necessarily losses, and that's where the gentleman said that, you know, you might not get the entire $1 million back because maybe it's some of those quantities are the fire department uses water to fight a fire, right? They've got other things to do when they're fighting a fire than to measure how much exact water they use, right? So that's unaccounted for. Flushing gets done. It's not all monitored how much gets done, and there are legal connections and all the rest of the stuff that when they're found, your return goes back up, right? So there's components to the water loss. Not all of it can be gotten, but there's a whole section in the report. It would take me for the rest of the night to go through the entire thing with you, but does that answer your question?
Councillor?
Kind of.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, kind of. But I guess the way my brain works is that if it's like $1 million or close to it in money that, you know, is literally going down the drain, then my thought would be, what is the way to have that not happen? So in terms of capital projects, you know, you want to be able to get whatever would be able to be fixed in that way to contribute to less money being lost somehow makes sense to me. So I just wondered how it worked, if it worked into that component of identifying like worst first and when you get down to it. Exactly. So if that's part of the criteria, I guess, because how else you have to tackle it somewhere, I guess. At least I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. So we are looking at the worst case, the worst areas as part of the priority projects for the capital plan. Yes. I mean, these are areas that are old. Basically, they're old cast iron pipe, and we're looking at 50, 60-year lifespan. These cast iron pipes are 50, 60 years old now. Right? I mean, they're not getting any better, right? So that will, any time you replace a cast iron pipe, you're improving the tightness of the system. Do we know where the leaks are? No, not exactly. No, that's part of what the engineering department's already looking at DMA, the metering, to find out where to effectively go look for leaks. And when they find those things will come up and. Say for example, if they do leak detection next year and find that there's really bad in these areas, really bad leaks in this certain area, that's what I was alluding to before, when these priorities may change over time. As you find new information, you get new things done, more budget comes available, maybe you'll do 2 years in a row, who knows? You know.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Further questions, comments, members? To the presenter? To staff? With none? Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ron, just one question. I'm sure that the next budget process, water wastewater budget, we're going to see that list of worst, first, In particular, Ron, and most importantly, is what gives us the best return if in fact those investments are made?
Mr. Mayor, this study actually does that for us.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see from the numbers here that this is going to be a great tool in implementing the 2015 water budget. You can see what increases are required. Council will then be able to deliberate and determine what's the best fit in terms of the rate itself. The study will identify first in terms of capital projects, and that'll all be done as part of the 2015 program.
And having said that, Mr. Heil, going into 2015, is the council of the day going to have an opportunity not only to deal with water, wastewater, but ultimately to also deliberate the priorities with respect to the asset management plan?
Yes.
Good answer. That's a first, by the way, Bob. Great. Thank you, Mr. Hanson, and thank you, Bob. With that, members of the council, we do have a motion moved and seconded by Councillor Elliott, and I believe it's seconded by Councillor Doucette, was it, Ashley? Any questions or comments further? Your pleasure to the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Councillor Doucette will now move on to item 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Department of Engineering and Operations, Engineering Division Report number 2014-32, subject, update report on the storm sewer system infrastructure needs study. Presentation will be done by John Van der Erden. Did I say that well?
Van der
Erden. From Associated Engineering, and will be providing a presentation with regard to the above report. That Council of the City of Port Colborne received the Engineering and Operations Report 2014-32, update report on the storm sewer system infrastructure needs study, be received for information.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. We have a seconder to that, Councillor Desmarais. John, welcome. Come on up, the floor is yours. Press the green button, you're live. Use the mouse, and you got the PowerPoint at your disposal.
What's the PowerPoint there? You don't want to be there, do you?
Double click that second screen right there. Right there. There we go.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, and staff. To present the storm sewer system infrastructure needs study. I'll be presenting the first half of the presentation, and then Mike's going to come up and supplement the second half, talking about the capital budget for the proposed works and also some funding strategies. Rick, just advancing the slide. There's just a delay on, just roll it, okay. Thank you. For a brief outline, I want to talk about 96 kilometers of storm sewer in about 10 minutes. So we'll cover ground very quickly, but this is an outline of the presentation. Just starting off with the project objectives, a little bit about the system. What are the reasons for the recommended improvements? We'll talk about the condition of the sewer system as it currently exists, the capacity, recommendations, and then Mike will come up, as I mentioned, to talk about the cost of the upgrades and some possible funding strategies of how to deal with it, and then just an opportunity for questions at the end. So the project objectives are to, first of all, complete a comprehensive assessment of the existing storm sewer infrastructure, to identify and prioritize the policies, upgrades, and expansions to the system, and to achieve the target level of service for over the next 25 years. The drainage areas are broken up into 22 sub-watersheds that are shown on this figure. And the western area drains towards the Eagle Marsh in Wainfleet and then drains back out to Lake Erie to the south. Some of the southern sub-watersheds drain directly into Lake Erie, and the central sub-watersheds drain internally directly to the Welland Canal. And most of the outfalls are actually equipped with flap gates. So this means that water can discharge from the system. It's a one-way valve. The water can leave, and then the flap gate closes as lake levels or canal levels rise. So it is a one-way system. It's basically a check valve. Just on this plan, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but in the center of the slide is area 22, and that's the Omer area. And also at about 6 o'clock, sub-watershed areas 14 and 15. And I mentioned those because they're part of a more detailed I&I study, and that the information extracted from those studies was very valuable in assessing the condition of the storm sewers and was able to a certain degree, be extrapolated to the system overall. So the reasons for the improvements, or why we're undertaking the study, first and foremost is the structural condition of the sewers that they currently exist. The level of service is really the capacity of the storm sewers. Are they big enough to accommodate the storm flows? We also have to make sure there's enough capacity to accommodate proposed and future development. And also, we have to consider the community improvement plans and what effect that might have on stormwater flows and whether there's opportunities through those improvement plans also to manage stormwater. And finally, the final bullet, recommendations of other city initiatives. This primarily refers to the I&I study and the desire to move sanitary sewer flows, the clean water flows that are going into the sanitary system, to get them off of that system and redirect them into the stormwater system. So that's the desirable outcome, but of course there has to be enough capacity in the storm sewer system to do that without causing flooding or other detrimental impacts. So the storm sewer condition, one of the first things we do with this type of study is to look where the complaints have been. Historically, is there a concentration of complaints or problems in any particular area? And so we went back through the records and we plotted that, and we found that the complaints and issues are pretty evenly distributed throughout the city. There's not one concentration of complaints over the last number of years that would really identify one particular area as being particularly problematic. But in the Omer and Nickel areas that I mentioned earlier, where we were able to complete more detailed assessments, the condition of the storm sewers is considered poor in most of the storm sewers looked at. And I suppose that's not really surprising. I added this bullet that the previous study completed in 1978 recommended 70 kilometers of storm sewer works, but up till now only 20 kilometers of that work has been completed. So when I talk about sewers being in poor condition, this is what I'm referring to. So these are just typical, well, not typical, but these are the type of defects that are occurring in the storm sewer system. The top right is a photograph or an image taken by closed circuit television of a storm sewer that's failing or really has failed in the Nickel area. That storm sewer is in imminent risk of collapse. And with that collapse, of course, you're going to have a sinkhole, you're going to lose the road structure, sidewalks, curb and gutter, other infrastructure, and of course the soils that are surrounding it are going to end up in the storm sewer, quite possibly being washed into the storm sewer, which is another cleaning process. It can send a plume out into the receiving waters. And even after all of that, you still have to replace the storm sewer. So the point is that a proactive approach to this type of problem is obviously beneficial to allowing that kind of damage to occur. The bottom left is a similar image. I know it's a bit overexposed, but that's from the Omer area. So if you're wondering whether those images in the previous slide are just very localized area, this is just the Nickel area alone, and all of those dots represent a defect that was identified in the storm sewer system. The red dots are severe defects, like you saw in the previous slides. Yellow are moderate, and green are minor defects. But you can see that there are a large number of severe defects throughout the Nickel area. And that can be extrapolated to other areas of the same age and pipe material type. Each type of defect is also identified in this plan with cracking and structural failures of various kinds. When we look at the capacity, the desirable capacity of the stormwater system is to be able to handle a storm that occurs on average once every 5 years. But we backed up from that a little bit and said, well, what happens if we have a 2-year storm, a storm that would occur on average every 2 years, and we run it through the existing system? And under that condition, approximately 11 kilometers of the storm sewer has insufficient capacity. That means that 11 kilometers is at risk of flooding. If we go to the desirable capacity of the storm sewer, so we run the 5-year storm event, and then we add the disconnects from the sanitary system, so taking private property sump pumps and redirecting them to the storm sewer, that 11 kilometers increases to 16 kilometers. And so those 16 kilometers would be at risk of flooding under those conditions. The recommendations, as you saw in the Nickel area, there's been a very good program of closed circuit television inventorying of the infrastructure. And so our first bullet is sort of to carry on with that program. It's better to camera these pipes and understand what you have and where the problems are, and to help you prioritize the upgrades. So the number one recommendation is to carry on with that program. The outfalls, I mentioned, there are flap gates on the outlets of most of these stormwater systems. So inspecting those is very important. Once the lake levels and the canal levels rise, it's too late. You have to do this on a regular basis and make sure that they're ready for the rising water levels. Replace all failing pipes, so that's referring to some of those images you saw with the structural defects. Next priority would be upgrading undersized pipes, starting with the most severely undersized and then getting up to the 5-year standard, but replacing everything up to that with the 5-year standard storm sewer. And generally working from a downstream to upstream direction. You always want to start at the downstream end. The 5th bullet, adds dedicated sump pipe for unserviced areas. So there's many areas, or some areas in the city, that currently have no storm sewer, period. And yet in those areas there are sump pumps. So where do those sump pumps get directed to? And we recommend that the sump pumps do not get directed to the surface where they can freeze in the winter. It's just problematic. The lot grading is not conducive to doing that. So that requires a new pipe that can be a dedicated storm sewer pipe only for receiving the flows from the sumps. And then, of course, there's construct new and or upgraded pipes to service new development areas and upgrade areas or redevelopment areas. So those are the principal recommendations. And what that translates into is in total 35.7 kilometers of upgrade and replacement pipes, which is around, it's a little under 40% of the total pipes in the city over the life of the program. But so it reconstruct existing sewers 26 kilometers, upgrading for capacity an additional 4.9 kilometers. The dedicated sump pump drains into existing unserviced areas 2.7 kilometers, and construct new storm drains to deal with proposed developments. That's 1.9 kilometers, and that doesn't count the developments themselves. That would normally be dealt with by the developer. So a total of 36 kilometers out of the 96 kilometer system. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mike to carry on with the capital and the cost of this.
Before I go on to Mike, members of the council, any questions or comments to the presenter? With none? Okay, thank you. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you. Let's hope I can make it work.
You got better news for us?
No. Not at all. Water, there was $1 million a year capital that you had to finance. Sewer, here's the total tally. Total cost is $54 million. Average annual cost, ballpark, $3 million a year to finance.
That's just storm sewer.
Storm sewers. I didn't. This analysis, unlike the previous analysis, does not cover operating and maintenance costs. So it doesn't cover the sewage flushing. It doesn't cover sending cameras down the sewers to monitor them. It's just financing the capital works. So $54 million. I spread that over a 10-year period. At that rate, it was no, it was longer than 10 years. It was 20 years. It worked out to about $3 million a year. If you look at the tax rate, your tax rate is about 0.0074 now, 0.0075. I haven't seen the 0.074. This cost alone adds up to about 0.0017. It's a 20% increase in taxes just to finance the sewer works. If you finance them over the designated time period. Okay, so it's a huge hit, and you're gonna have to do some serious head scratching to figure out how are you going to schedule them, how are you going to prioritize them, how are you going to marry these in with all the other asset priorities that you've got. You also have to figure out whether or not you want to finance these on the tax roll or consider something like a storm sewer charge. Storm sewer charge is like the water use charge, like the wastewater bill. It's like an electricity charge, okay? It's a charge paid by the individuals who are using the storm sewers. So if you have property in the city that is discharging to a storm sewer, you pay in proportion to the discharge you send into the sewer.
It's very similar to the Drainage Act.
Yeah, it's similar to the Drainage Act, but here, in this case, it's an ongoing charge. It's an annual charge. It's not just a charge that applies when you implement the project, the Drainage Act. Let's see if I can make this thing work. So, there's probably about 2,000 municipalities in the States that are using this kind of charge. They started in the 70s in the States. In Canada, it started out west, I think, in 94, 96. There's no systematic inventory of these municipalities, but I could find 16 municipalities in Canada that have a stormwater charge, including 8 in Ontario. Most of the Ontario charges have been introduced within the last 5 or 10 years. The way you structure the charge, the theory is you either base it on the total area of the property, which is like the total area of this room, or you base it on the impervious area, which is like the surface of all the desks. The water runs off the surface of the desk really quickly, it soaks into the carpet. Okay, so the desks contribute to the storm sewers within 20 minutes of the rain event or sooner. The carpet will hold the water for some time, unless it's a very heavy rainfall. So you base the charge on the total area of the lot or on the impervious area. And the impervious area for the lot is the roof. This is my version of a schematic. Okay, the driveway, the sidewalk, the garage roof, the house roof for a residential property. Okay, or you can do a combination where you do like a weighted average. You factor the impervious area because it contributes more, and then you have an inventory of all your lots, and you figure out based on the relative contribution of impervious to pervious area, you figure out the total contribution of the individual lot to the storm sewer during a design storm event, like a 5-year event or a 10-year event. When municipalities actually implement this kind of charge, what they do is boil it down, simplify it, and what is typically being seen in Canada now is called a tiered structure. So for residential, you might have 3 tiers: small unit, typical unit, large single detached unit, or a large duplex. So they have 3 rates that apply to 3 different types of residential structures. And then for multi-res, they might factor, they might say there's 10 units in that multi-residential building. Each unit will account for half of a residential unit. So the 10 residential unit building will pay a rate that is equivalent to 5 households, 5 standard units. And typically with a tiered rate structure, the industrial and commercial properties, the rates there are actually based on the area of the lot, and the impervious area or the total area of the lot, or a combination of the two. Okay? So what are the implications of doing that? I indicated that with the property tax, we've got a large hit on the property tax. Here's what the rates look like if you're just doing a simple calculation based on the size of the area, the size of the parcel, total size of the parcel with the size of the impervious area in the parcel. Okay, as part of the work that Associated has done on this, they've actually assembled a database that has all of that information in it. So you can see here the black is the property tax payment to cover this capital plan. The red is a charge based on the impervious area. The blue is a charge based on the total area. The residential properties, there isn't much change. It's a bit lower with the user charges, but not much lower. The, the residential properties are paying about $250 to $300 a year to pay for this capital plan. The multi-res, if it's based strictly on area, will pay a lot less with a user charge, a stormwater user charge. But if we go to a tiered structure, that differential will change, and they'll be paying less, but not the change won't be as dramatic as is shown there. Industrial will pay more, and commercial will typically pay more under the user fees. Okay, but I think the key thing here is that the residential are paying. They end up paying about the same amount, whether it's on the tax bill or it's on a sewer fee, a sewer user fee. However, the resident with the large, half-acre property is going to be paying a lot more than the resident with a property that's 3,000 square feet right downtown. So the mix within your residential property might change. The mix of the cost burden. Those are the principal messages coming out of the financial analysis, and it's not a good news story.
Thank you. Members of council, questions or comments? Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This certainly isn't, this way of allotting charges for water certainly isn't new to residents of Ward 4, which is the rural area. Yep. We've been doing that for years. And where we only pay, not residents of the city, only the property owners in Ward 4 pay for their drainage. This is really just another way of doing the same thing they've been doing in the rural area for 100 and some years. Yep. I think I've questioned this ever since I came on council. Why should residents of Ward 4 pay double, basically? Because we're also paying for storm sewer in the city, and also to get rid of our water out in the rural areas. So this concept has been used, like I say, in the rural area forever. It's nice to see it put in perspective like this, and I think this is something that that we should really look at and see whether it's practical for the city of Port Colborne.
Thank you, Councillor. The question to that, and of course members of council, Councillor Bodner is referring to the Drainage Act. Is there legislation, as there is in the rural areas, the Drainage Act, that determines not only the, I'll use the word mapping of these properties, and of course the analysis of what these properties would otherwise contribute to the drainage shed, and then therefore, through that analysis, is an amount of money they would have to otherwise pay. With that, there's also a process that through a court of revision, through tribunals, that these folks can actually appeal and or question their charges. In the urban area, if this process was looked at and or in other areas that is being utilized, is there legislation that actually attaches itself to it as it would otherwise attach itself to the Drainage Act?
No, the Drainage Act is very specific and very, very prescriptive on exactly how this is done. what recourse people have, and so on and so forth. The Municipal Act, you are operating under the same articles that allow you to charge a water rate and a wastewater rate. It's not prescriptive. It just says you can do this if you want to do it.
What I'm getting at,
Yeah.
ultimately, is it may become somewhat arbitrary. And not only that, but also if people in the urban area would challenge those findings, how would they then otherwise go about it versus just simply lodging a complaint?
The more detailed you structure the charge, if you move towards what they do with the Drainage Act, it's not arbitrary at all, but it's expensive to implement, and you can even within there are municipalities that this is more on the ICI side, but that have credits. So if you're a mall with a huge parking lot, if you put in storage, underground storage for stormwater, and that can capture a 2-year storm, you get a credit for that. So your rate is knocked down. And like the property tax, you can also exempt properties like non-profit, religious, and so on, if you want to, if you don't want to hit them with this charge. However, with water and sewer, properties that are exempted under the property tax pay the stormwater charge. So you may choose that you don't want to exempt them anymore. Okay, but no. To answer your question, there are rate structures for stormwater that are complicated, that require a lot of data assembly, and they give you a fairly precise allocation of cost to individual property owners. Okay, and there's a trade-off. You implement that kind of complex charge, you're increasing the cost because you have to monitor properties. You have to monitor properties, monitor impervious areas on the properties. So you may have to maintain a database that you have to update at least every 5 years.
But unlike the Drainage Act, people would have no method of challenging those findings.
No. Under the residents can challenge water and wastewater rates in front of the OMB, but it's never done. Some time ago, I searched for cases of water rates challenging the OMB and couldn't find any.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Members, further questions or comments? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This report is the report I gather that we've been talking about for about 1.5 years, that I keep being told it's coming, and it's finally here. I was hoping to get some kind of real answers. The only thing this really tells me is that to repair everything we have to repair is going to cost us $54 million. That's number one. Number two, we're going to have to find a way to extra charge our citizens in some way to be able to deal with it. And number three, if I remember right, one of the recommendations in here is to have another study to study something we thought we were going to get an answer for. Now, can I maybe get responses to that from the gentleman that just responded, and maybe Mr. Hansen as well, through you, sir? Because I was hoping this was going to give us all the answers. And it doesn't appear it does.
If you can, guys, too, and I'll allow all of you to speak. One of the things I like to do is, and I'm looking at the actual report, is break it down to new storm service, existing replacements, so on and so forth, and in terms of the amounts. Because from reading this report, I'm assuming that the $54.13 million isn't all just replacements. It also includes new storms as well as replacements and upgrades.
This is a breakdown here. New storm service is relatively new storm service is relatively small. New third pipe is the sump pipe.
Yes.
That's relatively small. Reconstruct existing sewers upgrade is the big item. Those are the sewers that have structural problems. So that's cost reconstructing existing sewers 39 million out of 54 million.
Okay, Councillor? Mr. Hansen, do you want to comment first before you're good? Okay. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I mean, everyone is aware in this council anyway, that I've been constantly pushing for a definite strategy for the Wellington, Clark, Humboldt area. And it's been on the books for what, going on 12 years now, if not maybe 15. All this tells me is that there is a serious there is a serious concern with undersized and collapsing pipes. And we know nickel for sure, but the area that we seem to get a lot of, we as councillors anyway, seem to get a lot of complaints about when there is a major storm and there is basement flooding is in that Clark area, okay? So I'm not seeing anything here that will help me get that done, except for the fact that if we add all these charges on, then we will eventually, and if we invest $3 million for the next 20 years, we might get there. Okay, that's the only thing I see in this report. And maybe can I get an explanation of what the other report is supposed to do compared to this one, the one that is recommended?
Gentlemen.
Can I just speak to that one question?
Mr. Hanson, go ahead.
We didn't want to duplicate what was already done, Councillor Doucette. There's 3 areas that were already designed and estimated, and Council has seen those numbers. We have that design finished. This was more of a global look in terms of the entire urban area and what had to be done in the urban area to get not only what the capital program might be, but funding strategies for Council to review in order to do that. It is still up to Council to decide after disseminating all the information that's available from the designs that were done in those 3 critical areas, as well as the capital program that's here and the costing that's going to be assigned to that. Council still has to make a decision on what those priorities are, which area is going to be the highest priority for Council. This study will not definitively tell you do Clark or do Rosemount as opposed to another one. That decision can't be made unless you had a huge pot of money to actually tackle them at the same time. So we didn't want to duplicate with this study what was already designed. It did look at other areas like the Nickel and Omer area where studies hadn't been done and designs hadn't been done. So that's the approach here. So it really does cover, I think covers your question that those areas have been designed and they have been estimated in terms of cost. This gives you another tool to determine how to fund those programs if you decide to go ahead in those specific areas.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, the final slide that we had actually includes the recommended improvements. I recognize this is difficult to see, but within the entire storm sewer system, there is an indication of which pipes are recommended for upgrade and the reason why they're recommended for upgrade, whether it's a structural condition or a capacity issue. So there is, the report does encompass the entire drainage network, and it does make those recommendations within the report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Yes.
Further questions or comments, members? We're done? Thank you. Well done. Mr. Hanson, any further comments? You're good? Members of Council, we do have a motion on the floor. It has been moved and seconded. Councillor Doucette, go ahead.
The last question I had was this new report that is being requested, what is that going to give us more? Or am I reading it wrong? I missed or I read that recommendation improperly. I believe I saw somewhere where there is a recommendation for an added report to this for 100 and something thousand. Or did I miss that? I don't know. Maybe I misread.
Gentlemen?
I'm not aware of that report.
Mr. Hanson? No. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Members of Council, any further questions or comments on the report? Has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thanks, guys. Great work. Mr. Heil?
Your Worship, if I may, one of the things that we're working towards is to identify the needs for all of the capital requirements. Council, all municipalities in Ontario right now are required to go through this kind of exercise. And I'm going to tell you that from my perspective, and having been in this for over 40 years, Port Colborne's not in bad shape. It has its issues. But I know there are other municipalities in this province that are in much worse shape than what Port Colborne is. And Port Colborne has, over the past number of years, been working to try to get caught up to this. You will recall, and I know everyone has heard, the issues by the federal government, the provincial government, that the infrastructure across this country is falling apart. And that's just a recognition that the infrastructure needs to be revised and updated and fixed. The PSAB, Public Sector Accounting Board, and Regulation 3150, its standards, established a capital fund. And that's what we've been bringing to council for the past 4 or 5 years, and we continue to upgrade that. You will be receiving a report soon on an overall perspective that the province requires you to have before it will give you any further grants. It's just the way it's going to be. It is a recognition by the province of this, and all that we're doing with this is recognizing what you have rather than trying to identify problems. I'm going to say, Mr. Mayor, as the CEO of the municipality, there's a lot of work to do, but this municipality is in pretty good shape compared to some of the others. And we're going to work to bring council a reasonable approach to try and get this work finished.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. With that said, members of council, we do Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to what Councillor Doucette was speaking about, the $143,952. It's found on page 72 of the report, a request item A.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Members of council, I'm not going to move on to item 4, but I just wanted to make a comment with respect to what Mr. Heil had stated. Except in their funding allocations based on this kind of work that's already being done. The second part of that, as we have in the past, is leverage funding that we are able to get, and therefore, with respect to 1, the projects, 2, is also having the 1/3 contribution that some, if not most, municipalities don't have. We do. And it's not always from the taxpayer. It's not always from debt. We do have other mechanisms that we're working on right now to create new revenues to be that 1/3 contribution with the feds and the province included. But I think what's the most important message here is that the luxury that we have now is and Bob mentioned it, I think the word is key here, is we recognize what has to be done. Ron, I don't want to pick on you, and this is no intent to pick on you, but Mr. Hansen's been here for how long, Ron? 42 years. Okay, 42 years he's been in operations and part of the engineering department. And how many times throughout those 42 years have you actually had the opportunity to have the information that you have before you now?
Mr. Mayor, the last storm sewer INS was done in 1978. I was here. They're supposed to be done every 5 to 10 years. The water INS hasn't been done in almost 20 years. So we're really trying to fast track this stuff to get the tools to the councillors to understand what the needs are and how to fund these things. It's not easy. A lot of the times this hasn't been available to council in past years, but doesn't mean you have to build everything next year, but at least you have a perspective of what the needs are. That's the key.
Thank you. Mr. Sinez?
Through Mr. Mayor, just to add to that, the whole idea of where the province is taking us is, they started us with the PSAB in, doing financial planning and doing accrual accounting and getting us on board and looking at our assets and actually accounting for all the assets that we have. We had to do, if you remember, we had to spend 2 years doing all of the inventory of all of our infrastructure and so on. So it's a steady progression getting there. The asset management plan is the next thing that the province is looking at, and we do have an asset management plan, although it's based on the life cycle of the assets, which really doesn't really tell the tale as to which assets should be replaced because it's based on life. It's not based on condition. These two reports are bringing to staff and to council the condition of those of the assets. So that will be the second phase of the overall asset management plan that the province will be looking at, that we'll be looking at, that we'll be bringing to the next council for budget purposes. It's not going to happen overnight. It took a while for us to get the life cycle cost asset management plan, and all of this information has to be put into the database to determine what the asset management plan is going to look like based on conditions, not only storm and water, but also sanitary sewer, roads, and bridges. And those are the 5 major ones that the province is looking for all of the municipalities to get in order. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do all of it at the, within the next 10 years. It's going to be a 25, 30-year plan because they don't expect the taxpayers to have to put out the dollars for the increases that we could see. It just can't be done. So it has to come to affordability. And that's what bringing forward these to council into the next 3, 4, 5 years of budgets, that's when you're going to start to see the results of this asset management plan, and being able to determine and bring to council, these are the 5 major projects that have to be done. These are the projects that we can afford to do and move forward, and it'll make budgeting, capital budgeting, that much easier. But it is a slow process, and it's a long process to get all this proper information and the money in place is going to be the big thing. So that's the direction we're going in, and you'll see a report coming out soon on the asset management plan, which is life cycle. But again, it's an asset management plan that the province said, okay, now we need this in order to get funding. And that's how we got the $2 million for the Lakeshore project. And we have one on the books on the report for tonight, that the asset management plan, and it's right now they're looking at critical plans, critical health, safety, those types of things that they're looking at. So they're moving that direction, and I think we're moving in that direction, and it's the right direction we're going in.
Thank you, Peter, and once again, well done to all staff. We talked earlier when I was giving you your 25th year presentation, the guidance that you guys are providing council, and this is an example of that. So between you folks and the consultants, good on you guys, great work. And it gives us an opportunity now to really secure that asset management plan, validate some of the asks that we're making to the feds in the province, and hopefully they respond accordingly. So thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing. Jim, as well, back there, thank you. Great work. Members of council, we're now going to move on to what we're doing about 2 and 3. Items 2 and 3 is item 4, and how we're going to accelerate some of this this evening. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report number 2014-27, subject New Building Canada Fund, Infrastructure Component Small Communities Fund. That the Council of the City of Port Colborne approve the submission of an expression of interest for the Nickel Area Stormwater System to the New Building Canada Fund, Infrastructure Component Small Communities Fund by the September 19th, 2014 deadline, and further that staff report back to Council once the province determines the eligibility of the project.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Do you have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Danch. Questions or comments? Councillor Steele.
Just in reading through this, I mean, the one thing I do like about it is that it's an expression of interest so that we can proceed with it. And if the council of the time or when it's brought forward doesn't feel they want to do it, or they don't have funds for it, or they do have the funds for it and they can proceed with it, they have that option at that time. So it's not tying us to any dollar value today, but it gets us in that queue. It gets the province looking at our applications, and it allows council along with staff to budget for these types of projects going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments. I'll read through the report just briefly. New Canada Building Fund, they announced an intake in August this year. The intake and the process mirrors the small northern and rural municipal infrastructure fund that we were successful in early this year. We got $2 million in funding. This program mirrors it, whereby we put in an expression of interest for the Lakeshore Road water main. We were successful. The criteria for this are very similar. Preliminary evidence of current or future health and or safety issues. Both the province and the federal government put in $272 million for this program. And the applicant's economic conditions and fiscal situation are reviewed as part of the process, and that was similar when Corporate Services submitted our asset management plan and the status it had at the time with the water distribution report we had. So the program highlights, this has to be submitted by September the 19th, and it's just an expression of interest. If we're unsuccessful, they'll let us know by, I believe, October. If we are successful, then council, we will report back to council. Council can decide whether this is a project they want to go forward with or some other project in future intakes. In looking at the criteria, you can see in the report all the different types of infrastructure that they're looking at in terms of the criteria: public transit, disaster mitigation, and so on. We took a look in terms of wastewater, and I've included in the text here of the wastewater objectives and the subcategory, and I've underlined in the report separation of combined sewers and or combined sewer overflow controls, including real-time control and system optimization, and storm sewer collection systems and or stormwater treatment. This sort of falls in exactly with the report you're going to see on both the Omer and the Nickel Street areas, whereby we were able to separate the sump pump discharges that are going to the sanitary sewers now that we're treating. It's groundwater that's being treated. This provides 2/3 funding. There's no cap under the small communities fund that we're suggesting we apply under. There's no cap, and there's 2/3 funding. So in the case of the Nickel Street project, which I've outlined here, and it's in the report coming up in the agenda, there's a $6.2 million project to install new storm sewers in the Nickel Street area, replace those old storm sewers, and provide outlets for the 100 to 110 sump pumps that are going to the sanitary sewer. So there's a quick payback as well. Take 110 sump pump discharges out of the sanitary sewer system, quick payback in addition to the advantage of having storm drainage, proper storm drainage, and a system that, as the report will identify, is completely collapsing, on the verge of collapse right now. So this expression of interest would put in a $6.2 million application. We would be on the hook for, the municipality would be on the hook for about $2 million out of that $6 million in funding. The EOI, as I said, doesn't obligate council to proceed, only determines the eligibility or suitability of the project. You can only make one application per intake for each of the programs. I think I've covered most of these points here. It also fits in a payback for reduced treatment costs. It fits into the East Waterfront CIP. The East Waterfront CIP hasn't actually been designed yet, but it's something. In order to proceed with East Waterfront CIP, the storm sewers have to be rebuilt prior to any streetscaping being done, any improvements to the area. The storm sewers would have to be done first, just as we've identified in the downtown CIP with storm drainage. So that's the gist of the report, and we think this recommendation is probably the best project on very short notice. We only have a month to do this. Very short notice in terms of a project that may be eligible in terms of the criteria that's set out.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Just 2 points I wanted to pick up on, Ron. And Dan, you might be able to help out here too. You mentioned the CIP. We're sure that the infrastructure work that we're going to be doing aligns with the recommendations contained within the CIP?
Mr. Mayor, at the time when council has to actually consider the work to be done, we will be in concert with engineering, and obviously that will dictate what type of streetscaping or any sort of improvements that would be done. We need to have that assessment of the actual area, and I think this is the first step, the previous report that council received, to have that infrastructure in place before we start ripping up the roads.
And this attaches to the waterfront CIP?
Yes.
Thank you. The second question, Ron, you mentioned the return on investment. Has there been an analysis in terms of what the spend would be? Obviously, whether it's a debenture or whether it's a use of reserves or whether it's a use of other dollars that we can get our hands on, compared to the actual savings and or the efficiencies that would be had through the project. Has there been an analysis on that yet?
I believe the Nickel Street CSO study, which is a little further on in the agenda, one of the items that's being brought forward tonight, there is a number in terms of the payback on the sump pump redirection. I don't know if the analysis has been done because we weren't aware of this funding program over a month ago. We can certainly do the analysis, which would tell us the payback in terms of current treatment cost as opposed to the cost of a debenture going forward over, say, 20 years to replace the storm sewers. That comparison could be done. It could very well be that the payback on the reduced treatment cost could actually pay a portion of the
And that's what I'm
debenture,
getting at.
if not all. That, I'm not sure that analysis, but we know the number on the payback. That's done as part of the Nickel Street CSO study.
And that was the point I was trying to make earlier for members of council, is that when we're moving forward, not with just with this project, but any project, that we can continually have that analysis in place, so that therefore council can recognize that the savings ultimately pays for the financing of the actual project itself, regardless of how you finance it, that the savings would actually pay for that.
In any CSO program that we're going forward with, there's always a quick payback. We saw that in Arena, where those leaks were repaired. There was less than a 5-year payback, I believe, on the cost of the study to the treatment costs that were recovered from the system. So Omer and Nickel would have the same proportion, maybe even a higher proportion, because Nickel Street's got over 100 direct sump pump connections that at the present time, as the next report will show you, present time we cannot redirect those sump pumps. There's no place to take them.
And they're all going into the sanitary.
They're going to the sanitary now. The storm sewer is collapsing. We initially thought in doing this study that we could redirect to the old storm sewer system. The CCTV and all the analysis says that it's on the verge of collapse. We can't do that. So we're going to continue to pay for those treatment costs going forward until these storm sewers are replaced.
At the oldest part of town? Is that the oldest part of town?
1929 vitrified clay storm sewer system, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's members, further, Councilor Elliott, go ahead.
One quick question, through you to Ron, and it just popped out. I know it's maybe just a why, but on the summary of estimated costs for the 6.2 million on the east side, the estimated sump pump disconnect cost at 1.2 million for say 100. It's like $12,000 per sump pump. Why are we paying for that and not the homeowners?
Mr. Hanson.
I have to think about that. I guess there's a couple different ways to look at it. It could be an ability to pay. We actually, when we started the pilot program in Arena, the payback was so substantial that we actually went in and replaced the direct connections at our cost because of the quick payback on it. Council could decide that they wanted to assess that onto the properties. History has shown in some previous areas that if you leave it to the homeowner may say, they may come forward and say, I can't afford to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to redirect my sump pump, therefore I'm not doing it. He would have to, that homeowner maybe would have to be forced to do it legally. It becomes quite a messy situation on the ability to pay. If the payback is quick, and Jim's just found the number for me, the analysis shows that in the Nickel Street area, there's $113,627 annually saved with the redirect. That may very well pay for a substantial debenture. So even if we replace that storm sewer line and gave them, if we went to within a meter of the building and gave them an outlet for the storm and had them then redirect at their cost, that's what we did in the other areas. That works very well. To ask a homeowner to spend $10,000 to redirect all the way out to the street to the sewer, it may not be effective. So it's something that could be discussed during the process, but the best bang, quickest bang for the buck, we go in and we fix it and then recoup it back on the treatment cost in the future.
Having said that, Ron, we did receive some money from the region with the Arena project.
Yes. The CSO program, which is, and Jim addresses it in the upcoming report, the CSO program that came out in 2008 has 50% funding to eliminate CSOs. The program eligibility changed somewhat in the next couple of years, so that what the region determined to be anything that's non-capital, in other words, maintenance costs working on the sanitary sewer systems was deemed to be not eligible, so we were paying a higher percentage of the CSO remediation on those programs. That policy has just changed. We've been instrumental. Jim has sat on the CSO committee at the region, has been instrumental in having that policy changed. And the recommendations in the report you see coming forward for both Omer and Nickel further in the agenda show that we actually want to take that funding that we have and say, no, we can't go any further with these two areas because of deficiencies in our system. We want to reapply. We want to reapply for 50% funding to put these new systems in place.
At the regional level? At
the regional level, and this new CSO program. The region has a pot of money available to address CSOs, and that's being distributed on an as-needed basis throughout the region to all the municipalities. So we're working with the region on that. We want to make a new application for these two areas with council's approval to get additional funding. We can't go forward as this sits now. So we would make those applications, and it very well may be that with the $2 million in funding that the city's required to make in this project, we could possibly piggyback that CSO funding towards our $2 million, depending on what the eligibility is going to be. So there may be further enhancements in having this study. And these studies have to be in place, even at the regional level. If these studies that you're going to see for Omer and Nickel aren't in place, you can't get the funding. You have to have them in place for it.
And that's what I meant, members, earlier about not necessarily having a default to the property taxpayer, the ratepayer, and or the levy debt or reserves. There's money available that we can actually take advantage of to leverage that 1/3 contribution. In this case, by the region. So we're working on it. Further comments or questions, members? With none, great job, Ron. I'll ask for a vote, members of council. All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you. Ron, just clarification. You said there's only one application allowed in this call?
There is one application per program. There's a small community funds, and there's another program available which has, it's exactly the same as the one we got for Lakeshore. It's a $2 million maximum, and there's a cap on the program. So we thought it beneficial to apply under the SCF program, which has no cap and 2/3 funding out of the $6 million. So if we applied under the other program for the $6 million, we'd only get 2 max.
Are we making any other applications under this, under the Small Communities Fund?
No, you can only make one under
this
the
program.
SCF, yes.
Okay, so under the Small Communities Fund, only one application?
One application.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay, how about the BCF, the overall BCF?
This is part of the overall BCF. There's 2 programs under the BCF.
That's right. Small
Community Funds and the OTIF, I think is the acronym.
That's right.
That's the $2 million. We didn't feel we were eligible under that program.
Not even for transit?
Criteria.
Peter? Not even for transit?
I don't think transit is not part of that application. I think it's just roads. Sorry, to you, Mr. Mayor. I believe it's just roads, water, wastewater, and bridges and that. It's the larger one that we're applying for now encompassed a greater amount of projects or eligibility areas.
Yeah.
Where the smaller one is just strictly those 4 different areas.
Okay, so we have the application going in the Small Communities Fund, and you're feeling right now, and I do understand that the BCF is going to be an ongoing process, and it's going to offer a lot more time for us to take advantage of it. But you don't see any opportunities now to make application under the overall BCF? Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Mayor, you can only make one application under the 2 programs that are available. It's all under the umbrella of BCF. There's the Small Communities Fund, and there's the other program.
My understanding is under the Building Canada Fund, you have the Small Communities Fund.
Yes.
For a population under 100,000, which you made application for.
Yes.
But also there's other opportunities through the overall Building Canada Fund that we can make additional applications for.
There's another program, it's called OTIF, I believe, and we didn't think we were eligible under that.
Not even for roads or?
No.
It has to be critical.
Health-related, critical. There was no other project that we had ready to go that, like Nickel or Omer,
right,
as opposed to the criteria that's set out in the other program.
Rail spur?
Well, again, there's no study, there's no background.
So we have to wait for that study to be completed before we can actually make application?
As I said, these studies are in place. Short sea shipping, short line railways, There's other programs in there, but you have to be able to identify what that is in terms of what your needs are and what is critical. There's nothing in place today, and those studies should be put in place. If there's something for the Shortline Railway, for instance, to extend it down, that study needs to be in place to give the background information and apply under the program.
Now, just a question to you, Mr. Howe. We were were successful at receiving the funding from the provincial government for the study on the rail spur.
Your Worship, correct. The Rural Economic Development Program, Council authorized it almost a year ago to make application, and the election came up. We have been awarded a grant of $30,000. The region is a partner and the city is a partner for a budget of $61,000 for a feasibility study in respect to rail on apron.
Now, with that said, that's going to give us a study to now validate an application?
Yes, sir.
And what's the timing on that?
The final study, we've been working with the province, is intended to be completed, Your Worship, I think the first week of May. It's the end of April, the first week of May, sometime in there. It's going to run over the province's fiscal end for about 2 weeks, somewhere in there is the current schedule.
Good. And if I may, Peter, if we can look at public transit, because there is a component to add in the Building Canada Fund for public transit. So if we can just double check that, because with a lot of the requests that we're getting right now with furthering or expanding our transit service, as well as the region coming back with the intermunicipal transit recommendations, we may want to prepare those studies for those applications. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and that would be under the program that we're applying for this program tonight. The other program is limited, like I said, to roads, wastewater, water, and bridges. So those studies would have to be ready, and depends on when the next intake would be for this 2/3 funding.
The public transit one is under the MIC, the Major Infrastructure Component Program of the BCF. So there's more than just two. Like there's the major infrastructure component. There's the communities component. There's a small communities component. So let's keep an eye on that and make sure we can validate these asks with the studies, because the more I read into it, the more they're announcing, almost weekly, and they're adding a lot of these components. And I think the Small Communities Fund was the last component they added. But just looking at some of the other programs they got the major infrastructure component, they got the communities component, and the list goes on. And public transit is part of the MIC of the BCF, of the Building Canada Fund. So it's something we want to be cognizant of.
And Mr. Mayor, that would be something I would imagine as part of the overall regional transit system that's being looked at.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we also want to be a part of that.
Yes.
So it can offset our taxpayers on contributing to the overall system. So, good. Okay, members, we'll now move on. We have item 5, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division's report number 2014-29, subject update report on the Omer Pumping Station Catchment Area Extraneous Flow Reduction Program. A, that the Council of the City of Port Colborne receive the Engineering and Operations Report 2014-29 update report on the Omer Pumping Station Catchment Area Extraneous Flow Reduction Program to be received for information. And B, that the Council of the City of Port Colborne direct staff to defer the current Omer Pumping Station Catchment Area Combined Sewer Overflow Programs by requesting the Region of Niagara to reassign the existing funding.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Danch, questions or comments? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you once again, Your Worship. And I think Ron has done a great job in his last little spiel telling me some of the questions I might wanted to ask. But there was just a few that I, just let me get to that report, okay, just one sec. I had highlighted. This was Mr. Hennepin's report, but it's on page 101 of the report. And it states that there are approximately 60 sump pumps that are still connected to the sanitary sewer, but that 12, looks like 12 have been, I think that's what this thing says, 12 have been taken off that. So I guess the cost, it says the cost for this so far, the current city's expenses for the OMER PC CSO program are $377,073.19, which dates back to 2009. But what I want to know is, and I think you kind of told me in your last, the 60 sump pumps that are still connected, that need to be disconnected, are we waiting, Mr. Hanson, then for a design on storm sewers to be established on OMER? Is that what we're waiting for? Because it seems to me the people who went to the trouble of spending the money and getting off the system haven't benefited from that. If they could get off, I guess, how come these other 60 can't get off?
Mr. Hanson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the same, Councillor Kenny, it's the same situation as we talked about in Nickel. We found in doing the study that the old system, if you look at the report itself, it'll show you a map of the southerly part of the Omer area, which is the Borden, Wallace area, which has old frontage tile, old storm sewers. These types of storm sewers are not suitable to redirect 60 sump pumps to. It would just surcharge and flood the area. You would have no capacity left for actual rainfall events. So what we need to do in the southern Omer area is to reconstruct, just as we're talking about with the Nickel Street area, we need new storm sewers in that area in order to put in a receiver for the sump pump distribution. So the intent of both these reports is to reapply to the region for funding to redirect the funds now. Now that we've studied this, we know what the needs are. We know where these storm sewers have to be replaced. We need to apply for new funding in terms of getting outlets for these sump pumps that are in the Omer area, the 60 sump pumps, 110 in Nickel. We need to get an outlet for them with new storm sewers. The other ones had an outlet. That's why they were redirected. Okay.
Councillor?
Just one more question. I believe the one speaker mentioned that they said they didn't think that they should go out onto their front lawn or their rear lawn, this rainwater that builds up in your sump pump, right? So, but really, could some of them do that? Could some of them do that in that area so that it would be less for us, or no?
It'll just keep coming back in your sump pump through your weepers.
Yeah.
So you'll just have this happening.
Well, mine doesn't.
It does.
Mine goes out into the driveway, paved driveway, shoots out.
Down into the storm sewer?
Shoots out.
Or the sanitary?
Yeah.
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, as part of the study when you're doing this, you take a look at the lot drainage. In newer subdivisions, you'll see that many of the lots will have either rear lot catch basins or they'll have positive drainage to either the street or to a swale. In the older areas, when you get into Wallace and Omer and some of the older areas that have been developed for many years, the areas are very flat. Many of the rear lots are actually lower than the road. So if you promote surface drainage of the sump pump discharge, you're going to flood everybody. Somebody's going to get flooded. And as the mayor has said, it's exactly right. The sump pumps will run constantly as they try to recirculate this water. So it increases your electrical bills and everything else. Nobody is gaining from having it on the surface.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments on this report? Members of Council? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. Item 9, Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move Department of Planning and Development Report number 2014-65, Subject Recommendation Report, Background Study and Development Charge Bylaw Update. One, that the Council hereby determines that no further public meeting is required under Section 12.3 of the Development Charges Act prior to adoption of the attached bylaw. 2, that the Development Charge Background Study attached as Appendix A and dated July 14th, 2014 as amended is hereby approved. 3, that the bylaw number 5354-108-109 as amended, the city's previous development charge bylaw be repealed effective September 9th, 2014. 4, that the development charges bylaw attached as Appendix B is hereby approved, which adopts the recommended rates and policies. 5, that staff be directed to prepare the notice of passing as per the Development Charges Act.
Thank you. Do we second to that, please? Councillor Butters, questions or comments? Councillor Steele.
Your Worship, I know you asked me to bring this forward. I'm quite happy with what staff has brought back to us and the good discussion we had at our last meeting. But I know you wanted to put some information forward, so that's why I brought it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Any questions or comments on this report? The one thing I wanted to bring forward is that staff was asked to come back with a report, and great job, by the way, Dan, with respect to some of the questions and comments that were at the last meeting. One of the things that I noticed in discussion with the Niagara Industrial Association, in particular their chairman, was, I guess for lack of a better word, a manner or a process that is a lot easier than the current process that we have in place. Twofold. One, we have a process in place right now that still asks for a development charge for industry, anything under 5,000 feet, unless they're within a CIP area, and they enter into a process that then judges them with respect to if they qualify for the development charges being waived. And one of the things that I've listened and learned from the NIA is if in fact we can just be consistent with other municipalities and quite frankly consistent with the intent of our bylaw and the direction that we're taking, and simply just say no industrial charges or no development charges for industry, period, versus having to, I guess, force these developers to go and make application, go through a process, so on and so forth. So what the NIA is actually asking for, and quite frankly I agree with them, that if it's the intent of council to actually have no development charges for industry, then say it. No development charges for industry, period. They don't have to go through a process. They don't have to, it's not determined based on square footage. It's just simply no development charges for the industrial sector. And that's what I'm asking council to give consideration to. So with that, I'll open up the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Worship. Just maybe a bit of a point of order through the clerk. If a change like this is made, Madam Clerk, will it affect how we can pass this evening? Or can we amend it and include it?
Ashley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, indeed. If council makes an amendment to the structure for the development charges, the bylaw will need to be referred and presented to the next council meeting for approval.
Councillor Steele?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you, Worship. I know what you're saying, Your Worship, but you know, we did have this discussion a meeting ago, and I know we did have one of our local developers, Mr. Timms, coming forward, and he actually congratulated us on what we have been doing, which was up to 5,000 square feet, and what we are proposing here today on the more housing and multi-res side. So in order to get this going, I would ask that council approve this evening. Our next council meeting, we can always come back and ask staff to, or even after this, to come back with an amendment to the bylaw to allow us, if council wants to, is to reduce that 5,000 square feet to include all square feet, which then eliminates. I know where the mayor is coming from in this, but I think it's important that we get this through. Our current bylaw is coming up, and I think Mr. Aquilina can answer it, Your Worship, very shortly, where everything does go to zero. So if we did nothing tonight, everything does go to zero. But I think we really have to have something on the table, and I'd rather go through getting this down and then maybe having that discussion at our next meeting where we can propose this to staff and they can come back with an amendment to the bylaw. So Mr. Aquilina, could I ask that, Your Worship?
And just to add to that, I think ultimately what has to be answered here, Dan, is that can we actually do that? Like this is a development charges bylaw. Can we actually pick and choose and or dissect it to then add amendments to it after the fact? Or is it the ultimate bylaw that we're actually passing?
Mr. Mayor, I'll answer Councillor Steele's question. The bylaw expires September the 14th. Back to your comment. This is under the Development Charges Act. If council approves this bylaw, we need to give notice. There's an appeal period.
That's right.
So if there's any changes that are going to happen, I would like to actually have the bylaw passed legislatively. And then maybe it's something that we can consider after that fact.
But you're stopping short here, Dan. I think what we're both getting at is that can you actually deal with it after the fact, or would it be preferable to actually roll it all in at once and deal with it in that manner because of the process that would have to have an appeal period, et cetera?
Mr. Mayor, as the bylaw expires September the 14th, I believe council meets again on September the 12th, if I'm not mistaken, or 15th? 22. So there'll be a period of time where we don't actually have a bylaw in place.
Which would mirror actually what we're actually proposing anyways, because we're actually proposing
It
having
would.
no development charges.
Mr. Mayor, there's also another component we have here is commercial that council has not given any direction on. We are reducing the commercial charge from 2009. It's being reduced, but that would not be reflective in any bylaw because there wouldn't be a bylaw. So there's industrial, residential, and commercial. So if council passes the bylaw this evening, we would then have to give notice of that, allow the public any opportunity to appeal. If there's no appeal, I can't see that there would be a further appeal if council reduces the industrial charge to nothing.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Members of council, further questions or comments? Councilor Steele.
So in essence, you're willing to wait. Can I put it that way?
Well, yes, but I'm expecting some direction to be given by council so that ball can start rolling now. So that way we can actually have Dan start working on that possible amendment, so we can pass it tonight, look at an amendment for a further meeting, and then hopefully pass it at that time. Mr. Aquilina?
Just one comment, Mr. Mayor, is we were following what was in our industrial CIP. And as you mentioned earlier, you need to qualify under one of the financial incentive programs. And once that is done, the development charges are paid to us. After the project's completed, we give it all back. But you need to qualify for one of the incentive programs in the CIP to do so. So if there's any change, what we need to do in the near future, is amend the CIP to then remove that if that's council's direction to do so.
Well, yes and no, Dan, but you gotta remember, this is only a 2-year period. So this is a moratorium for 2 years. So I'm not sure you wanna go that far with the CIPs when it sort of just kind of becomes a moot point.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I understood if you wanted a 0% for 2 years or infinity for the life of the bylaw.
I think the original bylaw that we're actually.
I understand the residential was 2 years, but industrial as well, that would be a 2-year freeze on that as well?
That's what I understood from the last motion, was it not, Councilor Steele?
Well, the moratorium was on residential multi-res, and we were going to continue to proceed with our current CIP and commercial industrial development charges already that's in place, because that's what constitutes all part of this. So we're really only changing the residential commercial, or residential multi-res. I have no problem coming back, but I'd like to see this passed, let's get it going, and then once this is done, if we can, Your Worship, give some direction to staff to come back to us with regards to if we looked at a moratorium on a 2-year moratorium for commercial industrial.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Steele. Councilor Butters?
I agree with Councillor Steele to pass this tonight, because as well, we did get, in the last report, we got the kind of like the financial side of what happens when we take it off the residential, so we should probably have a similar financial forecast, shall we say, taking it off industrial.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. So Councilor Steele, if we can have a...
Thank you, Your Worship. Can we waive procedural bylaws so we can give direction to staff with regards to development charges?
Move for leave. Councilor Elliott, Councilor Butters, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. So, Mr. Aquilina, in essence, can we have you come back to us in the next meeting or so? I don't know if it can be done by the 22nd, but at least to the first meeting of October, where you can outline cost implications with regards to how our commercial and industrial development charges are working. In the last number of years, what have we taken in? How is the CIP that we have set up, or the CIPs that we have set up, how has that been redistributed back to those commercial industrial developments? And you know, how if we go to a 2-year zero moratorium, what effect could that have?
Mr. Eklund.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, we can do that. Commercial and industrial.
Sure. Commercial. Yeah, basically the response, and Dan, you've seen this, the response from the Niagara Industrial Association was simply that wouldn't it be simpler to have no development charges on industry to match residential and commercial as currently is, or multi-res, I'm sorry, residential multi-res. So very similar to that. It makes it easier. It's comparable to both the city of Welland, the town of Fort Erie, and the city of Niagara Falls. And quite frankly, it's even consistent with the region. So if we can have that back here, great. Members of council, it's moved, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? Councillor Butters.
Does that include financial implication?
Yes. Great. Thanks, Dan. And thank you, Councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 11. You know, I really should have brought this up at the beginning of the meeting. I apologize, because the residents that were here that wanted to speak on it left. But we got caught up into the infrastructure debate so intensely, I forgot. Anyways, item 11, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Planning and Development Report number 2014-67, subject weed cutting invoice, 95 Victoria Avenue. That the council receives this report for information purposes and that no action be taken in regards to reversing long grass charges for 95 Victoria Avenue.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Doucette. Do I have any questions or comments to that? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have spoken at length with the property owner. She's doing her level best to make sure that this property located in Port Colborne is good to see, good to drive by, doesn't cause problems for their neighbors, but she has a real challenge in that the renters in the property. She's taking some legal steps that way, but she asked that we consider the difficulties that she's having, the fact that she doesn't really feel our policies properly protect the property owners by not giving her notice, and that we reduce the charges to the $110.97 outlined in option A. And I would like to support that. I think that is the way we should go.
Okay, so we do have an amendment on the floor. Do we have a seconder to that? Seconder to that. Councillor Kenny. Any further questions or comments on that amendment? Councillor Bodner.
Yeah, I can't really support this. I think that that we heard from the lady that she alluded that she had a grass contractor for other properties. Why doesn't she have a grass contractor for this? Also, there were some 17 properties that required cutting, 13 in 2012, 17 in 2011, 14 in 2013. As far as I know, we never gave any of those properties breaks when they had to have their property cut by the city. I just don't buy the reasoning why that property can't get cut by the owner. We went in there and cut it. I'm sure that, you know, she got arranged to have that property cut. I just can't see giving this this person a break on this. We didn't give the other 17 people a break, so I'll wait for other comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just seconded the motion, really to get it on the floor for discussion. But I'm in agreement with Councillor Bodnar. I don't believe that we should make any exceptions to this. Thank you.
It's more of a point of order. Can we have it show Victoria Street, not Avenue? It is street. It's in my ward and Dave's ward, and we know it's street. I'm looking at this going, it's not Avenue, so I even had the CAO check it. It is street. And I was sure I was right on that. Can we just make sure that's changed for the minutes, please, through you to Madam Clerk? Sure. I mean, it's unfortunate that people left, but I sat and listened last meeting. I really wanted to get up and say something last meeting, but I thought, no, I'll listen to the homeowner or the property owner, because it's not their home, and what council said and what they brought forward. My biggest concern here, and it's because I see it all the time in my business, and I'm sure Dave would see it in his also, because you're out looking at homes all the time, is that the fact that I look at some of these people as, and I'm not saying this particular person may or may not be one, but you get these absentee landlords. And my problem with that is that they get this bill because they haven't been around. I mean, they don't live in London or Toronto or Ottawa or North Bay. They live in Welland. To drive down to your property once in a while and take a peek at it. Is there abandoned cars? Is the grass long? You know, are they keeping the house maintained? Is there garbage in the backyard? So on and so forth. Those are things we deal with on a day-to-day basis as councillors. We get these calls. 90% of them are landlords. They're renters that are not taking care of the property that they should, or it's a landlord, where I've had it in the past. The tenant has no obligation to cut the grass because the landlord has said, I'm doing it, I've got my contract, and it never gets done. So I do agree with what Councillor Bodnar says. You know, we've got all these other people that we go after. You know, I think landlords got to be more diligent, whether it's this community or any community in Niagara across the province, in looking after your property. And Councillor Bodnar said this last time, and I really picked up on this. This is the third time. This isn't the first. It wasn't a mistake. It's the third time there's been a notice on this property. 2 for grass cutting, 1 for an abandoned car. So I do agree with Councillor Bodnar. I will support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Butters?
Yeah, the question that I'd asked last time was, Ms. Crichton had said that the renters were in the process of cutting it and were not completed, and then we came in and cut the rest of it. And that question really wasn't cleared up for me in this report. So I wondered if staff could expand or add to or clarify that.
Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under staff comments in the first paragraph, the very last sentence of the first paragraph, I did ask the senior bylaw enforcement officer, and she did not receive a call from the tenant. And that's indicated in the report.
Councillor?
But the lady that was here, though, had said that they'd started to cut the grass. So what my question, I guess, was not whether or not the tenants called, but if they were in the process of cutting it, why weren't they allowed to finish cutting it and then we would stay out of it? That was what I meant, if I wasn't clear.
Mr. Mayor, upon their inspection, first they inspect to see if the grass is cut. What they do then is come back after the notice period, and the bylaw enforcement officer determined that the grass was still in violation of the bylaw. And that's when it was ordered to be cut. It may have been cut a little bit, but the majority of the property still had weeds, and they were 3 feet high. That was what the comment that I had from the officer. And in the past, when we try to work with the tenants, we try to work with the property owners, when the bylaw says you have to have it cut by a certain date and it's not cut, we have to cut it.
Councillor, that's fine. Councillor Steele? Sorry, Councillor Elliott.
Victoria Street, they're not big lots. How long does it take somebody to cut a lot on Victoria Street? It can't be long. Maybe an hour to cut the grass there. My aunt and uncle lived there for 25 years. It's not big lots on that street, except for the neighbor of theirs, which is not this property, because they had a double lot. However, majority of those lots are not big lots. So for somebody to say, I didn't have time to cut it, and then you've got staff telling us it's 3 feet high, well, 3 feet is a long time for grass and weeds to grow. So,
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor.
You know, and just picking up on what Dan had said, if you look at the timeline, they got the complaint on the 14th, they green tagged it on the 15th, and 8 days later, they re-inspected it and then called our guys to go in and cut it. So in 8 days, they started to cut the grass. You should have had the whole thing cut, even if you did a little couple of strips every day. In 8 days, you'd have it all done. You take a look at the picture. Yeah, 3 feet. I talked to Ron earlier, you know, and I had forgotten that she said that she had a maintenance company looking after her other properties, but forgot to have them do this one. So, you know, when you take a look at the 2 pictures that are provided, the length of the grass, yeah, it was never cut. And when you take a look that she said that she wasn't provided with notice and that it was just given to the tenants, when you take a look at the house, obviously somebody's living there. I don't know that it's incumbent upon us to say, well, somebody's living there, but we're not really sure who it is. Somebody's inhabiting the house, it got green tagged, it's up to them to either call the landlord or cut the grass themselves, whoever lives there. So, you know, you can't let this one off and penalize the other people, so pay the money, cut the grass.
Thank you, Councillor. Further comments or questions? Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, to a few of the points that were made. Ms. Crichton didn't say she has a contractor that deals with her properties. What she said is she could have called someone. That's what she said. She could have called a contractor to come and do it. Had she known, she didn't know. Many of the things she told us in at the last council meeting was a repetition of what she had been told by the tenant. She has since then had to take legal action to there, so that'll tell you how reliable some of the things she was told were. There's no question on that one. And she understands that she is responsible for this. There's no question on that at all. Having read through the report, though, that she went on the website and read today, she has zeroed in on this $110 because it's made to look like that's the true cost to the city, and she doesn't feel that she should be made to pay more than the $110 considering the circumstance, and that she never really did get notice. I mean, the things that were happening, and we talk about 8 or 9 days going by, but those 8 or 9 days, she didn't have any knowledge of this occurring. There's, you know, she has no way of knowing that. And typically, a landlord who doesn't live within the city isn't going to visit the city to check on their properties more than maybe once a month to collect a rent. And that's really not very unusual. So, and I'm not saying we should let her off. What I'm saying is we have someone who's willing to work with us and try to have better residences available for rent in Port Colborne. She wants to be a good landlord, and I think we should try to work with her if we possibly can. If there's more than a cost of that $110.97 to the city, then she should bear that total cost to the city. But if it is only $110.97, then that is what I'd like to see us charge her.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments on the recommendation that's listed before you? The one question I have, guys, is and this is, I do have a problem with this. Who received the invoice?
Mr. Mayor, through the bylaw, council's bylaw, the letter advising that monies are going to be put on the taxes is sent through finance to the property owner.
So, are we hard pressed, besides tagging the door, to actually send a letter to the owner as well to inform them that they're being tagged? I don't understand why we don't do that. We do it to bill them, but we don't do it to actually inform them that they're being tagged.
Mr. Mayor, under the bylaw, notice is given to the property. Under that notice provisions, it could be the landlord, it could be the tenant, it could be the owner, it could be the property manager, whoever that is deemed to be notice. The fact is that when we don't know, if there is no building on the property, that is when we send a letter, express post letter. Because this is under the maintenance of grass bylaw, there is no registered letter we send as we would if it's under the property standards bylaw, because we have to follow up. It could be potential order of the property. We could add that, however, there's going to be more time. There's going to be a delay. We'd have to then prepare the letter, find out the property owner information, actually physically go to the bank, or sorry, to the post office to send that. It's going to slow down the process. If council wants to slow down the process, then If we can do that, it's going to be more cost, could be more staff time to prepare that.
Okay. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a little problem with that. First of all, I don't think we necessarily have to send a registered letter. You can post the property just like you normally would. A phone call or just a quick letter in the mail would do. If they say they didn't receive it, that is their problem. You know that you've done it, and you can show that you've taken that step. The property has also been posted, so it's there to be done. But we can't turn around and use time as a factor when we have a long grass complaint on June 16th, and we couldn't go out. It says bylaw enforcement was unable to inspect until 7 days after the complaint was received due to workload pressing matters. Well, you know what? If we can make leeway for our staff, then we should be able to also make it on the other side of the fence. Let's be fair, and that's all I'm asking for. It's just fairness here. It's one incident, one chance to just do right by this landowner that is trying very hard and is in a bit of a rough spot. It's not simple to deal with tenants that are difficult. We should know that. So I'm just asking for fairness.
So are you asking for an amendment to actually add, besides the receiving of information, that council or staff send a letter out to the owner?
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, I was bringing a notice of motion. I had brought a notice of motion about that and didn't, I was waiting for this report.
That's
By
fine.
the time I got this report, I couldn't compile the motion because there wasn't time left, but
Fair enough.
next council meeting.
So you're going to bring a notice of motion forward then? Okay, that's fine. Are there any further questions or comments on this recommendation? With nothing further, all those in favor? The original motion to receive for information. All those in favor? Pardon me? That's right. Which is take no action, which shall get charged the full charge. Okay, so I'm asking for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. So the amendment, we don't have to go back to, Councillor, and you're going to bring up that under notices of motion. Yes. Great, thank you.
No, she's bringing a motion for next meeting.
No, she didn't bring a notice of motion for it tonight.
Last meeting.
Oh, she had a notice of motion? I'm sorry, okay. Okay, members of council, that is it for this agenda. Well done, guys. Got through a lot. What's that? Yeah. With that, are there any notices of motion, members of council? With none, motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Butters and Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We will now move on to the council portion of our agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, none this evening.
Thank you, Ashley. If I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Steele. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? With none, I will look for a motion to accept the adoption of the minutes of the 25th meeting regular of council dated August 25th, 2014. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Danch, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any items requiring separate discussion? Can I have a motion for all the items in the agenda, please? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move on to proclamations. Another long one, eh? Thanks, Ash. I'll be looking for a mover and seconder. This is a proclamation for Community Health and Wellbeing Week, that whereas Ontario must achieve the best possible health and well-being for everyone living in the province of Ontario, and whereas health is much more than the absence of illness, it is the complete state of physical, mental, spiritual, as well as social well-being. And whereas better health and well-being begins in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces, and in the communities of which we live in. And whereas treating people's illnesses and sending them back to the same conditions that produce their sickness will only result in continued ill health. And whereas by ensuring better health and well-being for all, and by creating programs and services that improve the health of the entire community, we will ease pressures on the healthcare system, strengthen Medicare, one of our country's finest achievements. And whereas Ontario's health providers, health agencies, local health integration networks, and the provincial government must work towards a future without systemic barriers that prevent people from reaching their full health potential, a future where everyone can make the choices that allow them to live a fulfilling life. And whereas to achieve this future, we need to shift Ontario's fragmented sickness system to a community health and well-being system that promotes the best possible health and well-being for everyone living in the province of Ontario. And whereas during the first week of October, community health centers across the country will be spotlighting the importance of working better together to achieve a complete sense of health and well-being for all people within all our communities throughout the province of Ontario. Now therefore, I, Mayor Vincent Badaway, proclaim the first week of October 2014 as Community Health and Wellbeing Week here in the city of Port Colborne. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele. Seconder, Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? I think for the most part, folks, and thanks to the hard work by Harry and his team with the programs that you've introduced into the community under that one roof that we call the Valley Center, and of course working with the different high schools and the different recreational other facilities that we have in the community. This is something that's front of mind here in the city of Port Colborne, and I congratulate staff and council for that. But with that, the motion does and is before us. And with no further questions or comments, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? With none, Madam Clerk, the introduction of the bylaws, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 61279314 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement with dependable emergency vehicles for the manufacturing and delivering of a pumper tanker. Bylaw 61289414 being a bylaw to authorize the borrowing of $301,000 upon the issuance of debentures. Bylaw 61299514 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 11509781 as amended, rezoning lands west of Mellenby Avenue and north of Fire Station Number 1 for the purpose of government operations for public works. Bylaw 61309614 being a bylaw to adopt amendment Number 1 to the official plan for the city of Port Colborne. Bylaw 61319714 being a bylaw to establish development charges for the city of Port Colborne. And finally, bylaw 61329814 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with Ally Marine for the acquisition of parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Plan 59R 15129.
Thank you, Ashley. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele. Councillor Doucette, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Ashley, the confirmatory bylaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 61339914 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its meeting of September 8, 2014.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Danch, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. I'll now look for a motion to go into closed session. That council do now proceed in camera in order to address the following matters. A, the minutes of the closed session portions of the August 25th, 2014 regular council meeting. B, Department of Planning and Development Services report number 2014-64A concerning the potential disposition of city-owned land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. That's a mouthful, eh? A verbal report from the CEO, Chief Administrative Officer, concerning a human resources matter pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. D, a verbal report from the Chief Administrative Officer concerning labor negotiations matter pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392D, labor relations or employee negotiations. And finally, E, Department of Community and Corporate Services, Clerks Division, report number 2014-30, and the subject being the appointments to the Flavors Advisory Committee. That would be the Flavors of Niagara Advisory Committee, pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Mover and seconder, please. You have to think about that. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Elliott, are there any questions or comments? With none, do you have a question? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Have a wonderful week.